Oh man, what was? Oh, I was liking that video. What was
I
going
only
on?
caught the tail end of it.
Yeah, I
I didn't even know that
right
video
when
was
I
put
said that
together.
I wanted another monitor, I had the Skype over the fucking Twitch, and I
Oh
Uh,
missed
man.
it.
oh, it's okay. It wasn't that interesting, really. It was okay. It was okay. It wasn't my best piece of work. I literally made it in 5 minutes. Uh, well,
All right,
anyways,
you'll have to show me it later.
yeah, I'll show it to you.
I'll
I'll
watch
put
the
it up.
VOD.
Yeah. The VOD will be up hopefully if I can get around to it by tomorrow. So all you YouTubers out there, you're getting this maybe a day late. All right, let's start it up. Welcome everybody. Today is Monday, November 23rd. I'm Frosty, and this is MogTalk. If this is your first time joining us, MogTalk is a show where we discuss a variety of topics involving Final Fantasy XIV in hopes of to keep you informed and also to make you maybe even a little bit better of a player, whether you're a Sproutling or you're farming savage. I hope you guys have all had an awesome weekend and that you're all excited as I am to have these amazing people on the show to talk about tanking tonight. We have with us tonight two guests I'm sure you're all familiar with. First, we have the man, and when I say man, I mean someone who could sport a lumberjack flannel jacket and maybe be the person responsible for deforestation due to all of his sick fell cleaves. Zeno, welcome back to the show, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
Definitely, man. Next, we have one of the most intelligent and interesting guests I think we've ever had on the show before, or so far at least. And the very first warrior to actually clear A4S, Layla, aka XenosysVex.
Hey,
I'm glad to have
glad
you
to be
back,
back.
man. Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and start getting into it. Tonight we're going to be talking about tanking in Final Fantasy XIV. I've gathered a lot of questions and thoughts from my stream, Reddit, and other tanks that I've played or worked with to form our own discussion points for tonight. We plan to go over the current tanking meta, which defines DPS being one of the main priorities for tanks, comparison of the three tanks, and various other common questions and thoughts about tanking. And I know what you guys may be thinking. Why have a tank show talking about all of the tanks and the two players on the show are both kind of main warrior? Well, in all honesty, that's kind of sort of how tanking meta is right now. I know you guys have a little bit of experience with other tanks too, but you guys are really well known for playing warriors. Paladins and Dark Knights who are vocal about their class are extremely hard to find these days.
Sure. Yeah, they are.
It's
Yeah.
so sad. And we'll get into that a bit more later in our discussion tonight. So I want to kind of get in first starting about the tanking meta and how it is currently in the game, because this is one of the top things that people want to talk about when I ask them anything about tanking. And so let me switch slides here. So any tank who puts any effort into researching how tanking actually works in the game knows that tanks are currently pretty much weighted by their ability to DPS at this point. A lot of players have issues coming into the game knowing that because they have the mindset, hey, we're meant to solely prevent damage, hold the attention of enemies. So I want to just start off asking both you guys, what are your thoughts on this being a mindset that most of the players have? And Zeno, do you want to kick it off?
Well, I'm just gonna say I love the tanking meta. I love how you tank in this game. I think it's awesome. I came actually years ago. I came from Rift, and in Rift, it's a very, very traditional. It's been a long time since I played, but back when I played, it was very traditional. The tank, he did 0 damage. You stack block, parry, you evade. You're spam healed, that kind of shit. And like in this game, it's amazing because it's very intricate and it's very skill intensive, I think. And being able to do a lot of damage as a tank, it like separates every like this game from most games. Like it's amazing. I just really like the fact that it's so I guess involved. And I think that the added responsibility of DPS for a tank is amazing. So I'm a big fan of it.
Okay. Layla, what are your thoughts on it, man?
Yeah, so I pretty much echo a lot of that. I do think that the meta of Heaven's Word is quite different than the tanking style of Realm Reborn. And I do like the direction they've taken it in. I don't necessarily feel that it's completely on the DPS side of the spectrum, like some people have been alluding to and express their thoughts on. But I like the fact that Square has put in this avenue for tanks to be able to do a bit more damage in Heavensward and find a balance between mitigation and damage, because that brings new elements to tanking and progressing as a tank.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I played Warrior back in, I guess this would be 2.2 is when Second Coil came out.
Yeah.
I was so about, hey, I'm just Paladins, they have overpowered hologram. That's it. I don't care. I'm still good as a warrior. I can still be great. I can mitigate everything. I can do lots of different damage. Everybody thought I was crazy for wanting to main tank as a warrior. But that's completely changed now. Because, I mean, warriors are just really optimal.
Partially due to Heavensward, yeah.
Yeah, and they can mitigate a lot of different damage. Like, every time I would join up in a T9 group and I was the warrior solo tanking it, they're like, I don't know if I even want to stay in this group. Because they had such a thought process that if you weren't a paladin, what's the point in coming in and even trying to solo tank it? But
yeah, there was a stigma attached to warriors for sure for a while there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of that had to do with just the fact they were so bad in 2.0, and
yeah,
nobody, like, they were literally unplayable in 2.0, and I think it also stemmed from the fact that, like, a lot of, like, newer players that first play this game, they don't know, like, how you're supposed to tank. They think you're just supposed to stay in your tanking stance, stack all Vit, stack all Parry, and that's not how you tank in this game. And it's not really the player's fault, I don't think. It's SE's fault for not properly informing their players, because when you come from a different game, like I came from Rift, years ago, and when I first came to this game, I mean, I saw that skill speed Parry Bravura, I was like, I'm sold. That axe has Parry on it. I'm golden. I'm so glad that axe has Parry. And then when I got the Allegan axe, or when I first saw it, it had accuracy det, and I'm like, man, that's not best in slot. It doesn't have any Parry on it. And
oh man,
yeah. Yeah, and then like, I kept leveling up, and then I hit level 50, and I'm like, wow, doing more damage is so much better than stacking Parry. Like, I don't even notice the difference. Like, I spent a lot of time actually in turn 4 on ACT with like a full Parry build and a non-Parry, and I was trying to compare like the overall damage that I was taking, and it wasn't that much higher, like, if at all, really. So I don't know. Like, I think it's really, like, when new people come to this game, yeah, I definitely think that it's not their fault that they don't know how to tank in this game. It's SE's inability, like, to inform their players, and that's like Square Enix's fault. So like, when you see a new tank and they're doing all that, they don't know any better. So I don't know, but yeah, they definitely need to be more informative on that aspect.
By the way, I don't have Skype messages turned on. I hear it.
Oh, he said, need to reset my headset. It's dying.
Oh, okay, I got you. All right, that's fine. That's fine. Is it doing better now? Maybe I think
not.
it's still reset. Okay, that's fine. So we'll keep going into it a little bit here. And kind of, I want to talk about, do you guys think there's any reason to actually, should a tank's role really go back to where it's, hey, let's be a tank instead of going out there and trying to be as high DPS of a tank as possible? Because, I mean, in the long run, I'm guessing you still want to do as much damage as you can, but do we want to put it to where eventually the value gets to be, hey, preventing damage is better than doing damage? Would that make it still interesting for the game?
Test.
Yep, you're good.
You got it. Oh, no, you're not good anymore.
Nope.
It's okay. It's okay. He'll come back. Wait. You got it? I heard a beep. Nope.
Nope.
Poor Layla.
Rip,
Poor Layla.
rip headset.
Yeah. Uh,
That's
so,
surprising because mine's like a PS3 headset, so like I'm surprised mine hasn't broken yet.
yeah, no. That's pretty impressive. So let's talk about headsets real quick, though.
Well,
So,
mine's a PS3 headset.
PS3
Got it for
headset.
$20.
Yeah. It's okay. There's gotta be a workaround. Guys, we gotta we gotta fix it for Layla. How can we fix this for Layla here? We can make him,
We're good, I think.
we're good?
I think we're good.
Logitech headsets.
Logitech headsets. That's really sad because I think Logitech, I think, oh, this is going to be a good product.
You know, I made a comment about this headset. I think the last time I was on this show.
Mhm.
I just want to revisit that comment.
Yeah.
I hate this headset.
Oh, you know,
I actually changed from a Logitech headset to the one I have now, this PS3, because whenever I would make videos and do like voiceovers and shit, there was like absolutely no pop filter, and all my lows were super low and my highs were like super high. It was a really
yeah.
bad headset.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. All right, we're back. We're back.
Where are we?
We're okay. We're at the point to where
Nice.
we talked a little bit about how the game was set up and how its DPS is kind of the big meta right now.
Uh-huh,
And so I was kind of wondering what you thought about the meta right now. And I think, did we already go over that?
Yeah, basically, I sort of echoed what Xeno was saying about
Okay.
how, you know, I do like the way that the direction they've taken tanking in terms of they've given tanks an avenue of able to do more damage than they were in Realm Reborn, because now it's given us a fun and you know, interesting balancing act of balancing mitigation with doing more damage, and I thought that was healthy for tanking in the game
Yeah.
from a design standpoint.
All right, awesome. And so I was going to lead off into that, and then we're going to say, all right, so now, do we want to actually see a Final Fantasy game where we have tanking is going back to where defending is more valuable than actually doing more DPS? Is that something that we would actually be interested in seeing?
Well, I'm curious what Xeno has to think about this. You know, Mr. Manhood himself.
Yeah. Well, you came from
Um,
Rift, and you kind of had that experience there, right?
Wait, say that one more time. Sorry.
So, like, would you prefer if the game actually switched back to be more defensive, and the more damage you reduce, the better off you are? Or?
Like, honestly, like, this is my personal opinion. I love the warrior job. So if they were to scale back damage, like, yeah, it would kind of suck. It wouldn't be as fun, but I would still really like it because I really like timing my inner beast. I really like stance dancing. I really like manipulating my stacks. I
Counting
think all that
levels
is amazing.
and managing stacks. It's all a great part of Warrior. That
Yeah.
makes it really interesting. Even more so than the fact that they can, you know,
Yeah,
butcher's
they
block
hit
for
like
more
a
than
fucking truck.
some DPS abilities.
Yeah.
So it's like, to me, like, if they did scale back damage on tanks, like I said, I think it would take away from the intricate part, but I would still have as much fun. It just wouldn't be as interesting, I guess, because I would be more defensive. But realistically, what they should do, which they should have done this a long time ago, they should just make Vit scale with damage. Like, instead of strength,
That may be
Vit
in their
scales
future.
with damage. Because if you think about that, like, not only is that super user friendly and makes every player like just automatically better, because the Vit can carry like the lesser skilled players. But not only that, but when you see like a warrior with like 20,000 health, you're like, yo, that guy hits like a fucking truck. That guy is a
Yeah.
badass, you know? Like, I think that would be awesome. And hopefully they do something like that with the,
Yeah, there's rumors flying around that they're thinking about taking that direction in later patches.
All right. I mean, that sounds like it would be actually kind of interesting because you could definitely pinpoint who's a good tank just by how much health they have. Well, of course, you'll see if they actually know how to use their skills afterwards, but you can tell gear-wise, hey, this guy's really good. Because right
Yeah.
now it's a little bit complicated to look at it and say, oh, this guy's geared properly, unless if you actually know how tanks are supposed to be geared with melding and everything else. Um, so let's just go a little bit deeper into that and just say you have two choices here. You could do a lot of damage, and that's kind of what your tank is supposed to do, or you actually get more value. For example, the more damage you reduce, the better you're helping your group overall to kill a fight. And that was your entire focus, and doing damage was all you need to do is hold the aggro. And that was your only priority. Is that a system that you would be interested in seeing, or you would say, no, I still want to go out there and beat the hell out of things, 10k fail cleave, 14k fail cleave?
I guess it depends to what extreme you're talking about. If you think about where the game's at right now, I actually don't differentiate the two. The way I approach, mitigation and choosing when to mitigate and choosing how to mitigate things, it's generally to push the agenda of bettering my group's ability to do damage and kill the boss. I guess you could think of it as I approach tanking as sort of a support character for my team.
Okay.
I want to. My job is to make my teammates do better, and
Okay.
Whether that's through mitigating something to give my scholar an extra global to do something to top another DPS off, so that maybe he can blood for blood through a Giga Flare. As opposed to having to babysit me because I'm wanting to sit outside of Defiance for 3 extra globals, whether it's something along those lines or if it's being more hungry for DPS and pushing a phase faster to give my group more opportunities in that regard. It's all about playing to the benefit of my teammates, and I don't know if that completely answers your question, but that's kind of what I think about when you ask that question.
Okay. So you're just thinking it wouldn't really matter to you either way, as long as you have a way to be optimal and help
I
others.
guess that's what I was getting at. Yeah.
Okay.
The only thing that's of concern. What I'm saying is the only thing that's of concern to me is being able to improve, have a net game on my group's performance.
I gotcha. All right. So you wouldn't prefer a solid DPS class as much because the only gain you're giving is clearing the stuff faster, you think?
Yeah, I would
Okay.
say that's fair.
Okay. One of the big factors when we talk about mitigation and everything else is all 3 tanks avoid parry gear right now. It's like cancer or AIDS or something horrible that you can think of. And if it's on gear, food, yeah, it's
Pretty bad.
yeah. It's almost like they're overcapping accuracy when they get parry on their gear. It's just completely wasted stats. Or that's what
On a
people
few
see
of the fights, it's a completely dead stat. Yeah.
Yeah. Do both of you guys support this completely? And what are your thoughts on how it could be turned into something that people might actually desire?
Well, I think that they could do it one of 2 ways. One, they could just completely remove parry as a secondary and put it on the fucking weapon. Like, how Paladin has a sword and a shield, right? Well, the shield has the block rate, the block strength, all that shit. Just put parry rate and parry strength on the axe and greatsword.
Okay.
They could just completely remove the secondary entirely, put all that shit. They could do that, or they could put parry on every single piece in addition to the other stats, kind of like how accuracy was put on healer gear, kind of like in that sense.
Okay.
Like parry is amazing when it works, but the scaling is really bad, and the biggest issue with parry in this game, outside of the tanking meta, is the fact that in able to get parry, you have to sacrifice other stats that are important, and I think that's the biggest killer. Like, that's why parry's so bad. It's not necessarily the fact that it scales horribly and it's like it does absolutely nothing when you're off tanking. It's not necessarily those so much, but the fact that you actually have to sacrifice stats to get that, because it really adds up. Like, those secondaries, they really add up across your whole gear set. Like, it can really add up. So if you're trying to
Especially
stack
crit
parry,
this year.
yeah. So like when you're trying to stack parry, you're missing out on a shit ton of damage, and that's where it becomes an issue. Like, if it was just permanently added, to all the gear, it would be amazing. Or if they just literally put it on the weapon. So basically, as long as they make it free, because block is awesome because it's free. You don't have to do anything. It's just free. You just occasionally you block shit. So if you could do that with Parry, that I think that's the direction that they need to go. Because as it is now, it's too much. It's too costly to stack that for such a low return.
I gotcha. What are your thoughts on that, Layla? Is it the same or?
I think so. I have a few interesting thoughts about Parry actually.
Okay.
They may actually surprise a few people. I actually value Parry a bit more than the average tank, particularly for a couple of reasons. And this is going to be a multi-part answer, unfortunately. So
That's fine.
it may take me a while.
That's okay.
But I first want to talk about Realm Reborn a little bit, and Warrior specifically. Many people, most people don't know this. I've talked to a few people about it since then, but during a turn 12 progression, I was in Collision at the time, and we were doing turn 12 week 1 of the patch, and we were going into the I-110 gear level, some right side melds. That was about it. The way that we sort of handled our turn 12 prog was I generally tanked 4 to 5 Benus at a time, and this was at a time where healing through 12 plus of those stacks, which I'm not going to be able to remember the name of them, but the stacks that the Phoenix gives off, and they build up over time throughout the phase. It gets pretty hectic once you get around the double digits. When you're taking those menus, generally, in order to get through the phase in a timely enough manner, overpower is your best option. You want to be getting as many Berserk Unchained overpowers off as you can in the time allotted. And the thing about Overpower's interaction with Warrior Mitigation is you're not building any stacks while using Overpower. And when AoE tanking a group of mobs like that, you're losing out on one of your main forms of active mitigation in Inner Beast. So what I actually ended up favoring a parry set for turn 12 because of that. I found that having a high parry set gave me quite a bit of mitigation during that Bennu phase. And I didn't... The amount of det and crit that I was giving up because of the gear's itemization from 2.2 gear, it wasn't as detrimental as people might think. But that was just one example of where I actually didn't throw parry to the wayside and did recognize it as a viable stat.
Okay.
And I've sort of kept that mentality ever since then in regards to AoE tanking and maybe parry's viability. However, then came along Heavensward. And this is the second part of the answer, because as it stands right now, because of Heavensward, parry is generally a dead stat for Warriors, 9 times out of 10. In my eyes, Raw Intuition pretty much killed the stat and its viability for Warriors in its current form. Okay. And what do I mean by in its current form? Well, I actually think it would be very interesting because they have this issue right now of this of players not wanting to associate themselves with parry and when dealing with anything tank related. I think they need to reevaluate how parry rating works in this game. And one thing that I think would be kind of interesting if they wanted to consider changing it, I've always thought it might be interesting to have parry rating increase the mitigation that a parry actually reduces damage by. Maybe start it off at a low base value of say 10%. Right now it's in the 20s or so, and have your parry rating actually affect the mitigation that a parry does. What does this do? Not only does this make parry a more viable alternative to det and crit and skill speed even in certain fights, but it also brings back its viability for Warriors because it now synergizes one of their core abilities, Raw Intuition. And I think it creates this really cool gear dynamic, and it's something that Final Fantasy has historically lacked, is alternatives in gearing. Gearing for a specific fight a certain way compared to other fights. I think it would just be a really cool interaction. Then you have tanks like Dark Knight and Paladin that would just maybe benefit more from stacking parry on a fight where they're taking obnoxious amounts of physical damage. Think phase 1 and 2 of A3 Savage, tons of physical damage going out there. Maybe if you deem those parts of the fight more detrimental than the DPS check later in the fight, stacking parry is a desirable solution for you at that point if it affected mitigation. And then obviously you have cool things with Dark Knight that are already in the game of, with low blow cooldown relating to parry and stuff. And I think it would make parry a little bit more desirable and more interesting.
Okay. I mean, that sounds pretty interesting to me. I remember one of the ways
they'd of course need to adjust the actual base value that parry mitigates, because if it starts as high as it does now and
we don't really see an effect when we stack it. Like, we don't see any real noticeable difference.
I think in a Realm Reborn, it was around, linearly speaking, it was around 13.5 parry rating, gave you 1% chance to parry. I don't know specifically what it is in Heaven's Word. I think it's around 20, but don't quote me. I tried to do a lot of parsing of logs before Savage came out for a couple of hours, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
But don't quote me on that.
Okay, I gotcha. I remember.
I don't understand why they took the parry strength off of, or the parry rate off of
strength. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like I don't understand why they did that. Like they actually made it worse.
They definitely made it worse.
Like I don't like why would they do that? That doesn't make any sense.
They were clearly trying to homogenize this parry rating between tanks, because in Square's eyes, warriors were able to wear more strength than paladins, say, were at the time. So that may have been what they were looking at.
I mean, I remember when I was a tank in WoW, and back in the day, really back in the day, your goal was to get 3 defensive stats up to 100% combined total. Like, you would have block, and you'd have parry, and I think you'd also have dodge. And if you could get it up to that point, you just completely destroy content, because things don't really hit you that much anymore.
Yeah, the calculations though is different though in that,
right?
Because whereas in WoW, when you have like a 30% chance to do this, a 40% chance to do that, and a 30% chance to do that, it's all added together. Whereas in this game, when you have a 20% chance to evade, we'll just say a 30% chance to block, and then a 20% chance to parry, it doesn't add up. It checks each time. So you have like really shitty rolls. So it's like, okay, 20% evade, nah, fuck that, I didn't get it. 30% block, nah, I didn't block that either. And then 20% parry, nah, I didn't parry it either. Whereas instead of 100% or 80%, it's only like 20 or 30, like 3 different times.
I mean, is that something you would like to see if paladins could both block and parry, and those were combined and stacked on each other? Is that something?
I think that would be amazing. That's the way it should be.
be quite overpowered, but it would be cool.
I mean, that's the way it should be. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it would be really cool if that.
And then warriors had a bigger multiplier on their parry that could get it up to around that point or something. I don't know. Or just make them block with their axes. You can block with an axe, right? Put it up and just.
Sure.
You can parry with axe, yeah.
I mean, you can just hold it up and you can block things with it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
And why not? Why not? Anyways, okay. So a lot of other players, like you guys, definitely show your love for the current kind of DPS stance that the meta is at right now. Do you believe that changing it to where players have to be focused on more defensive stats and kind of gimping their damage overall, and that say, hey, if you don't focus on defensive stats, you're not going to be a good tank, would that make enough players actually not want to tank and make
as an alternative to what it is now?
Yeah, as an alternative to is right now. Would it make players just say give up tanking completely because it's not interesting enough?
It shouldn't. I mean, I can't speak for what people's interests are, but in my eyes, it shouldn't. I sort of alluded to this at the beginning of the show. I felt that a tank's role in a fight is to, is as a supporting member. It's a supporting member of the cast. You're there to make your teammates do better. And when you approach tanking in that regard, a more defensive playstyle shifts shouldn't, deter you from wanting to play a tank.
Right.
If you want to, if you're sole goal is to do big numbers, then just play a DPS. I mean, that's just the way I think about it. I don't know.
All right. Yeah.
I think very similar to that. Like, I think for the people that really enjoy tanking, they don't play tanks in this game because tanks do a shit ton of damage. They play tanks because they enjoy to tank. I think that there would be a lot of people, a lot of salty people that would not play tank anymore because, you know, you hear about it all the time in Duty Finder, Expert Roulette, all that shit.
Mm-hmm.
You hear about tanks have no idea what they're doing. They don't pop any defensives. They wear all strength gear, only in their DPS stance. Mobs are going everywhere. People are dying because they don't fucking know what they're doing. And those are the type of people, I think, that would not want to play a tank if they took away the damage.
Right.
But the really good, the really skilled tanks, they don't, at least in my opinion, just speaking from my own experience or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that the tanks that play tanks that are really good would stop just because they did less damage.
Okay.
Because like I think that it's really important to be like a supportive type. I think that you should be able to mitigate damage when you have to, and you should try to make your group as best as they possibly can be.
Okay.
I
mean,
I agree a lot with that.
so maybe the population of warriors will get cut in half, and then we'll be back to even, right? All right. So let's go into a little bit of comparing here, and I'm going to change the slide real quick. And you know, a lot of people will say a lot of different things about the differences between the tanks, and most of them will kind of sometimes in the end just say, "Oh, just play a warrior; it's more fun." But, all right, so the major discussion now I'm hearing from a lot of different people, though, is, you know, of course, comparing it. Right now, it's harped over and over by the general community that warriors are absolutely the best tanks outright. And again, we may see some one-sided stuff with our guest here because they're both main warriors, but, you know, there's a reason for it. People want to play warriors.
I am completely unbiased.
Yeah, I think Layla is unbiased. I don't think Xeno is biased, but I think Layla is unbiased.
Oh, that's messed up, man.
You're one of those.
Just because I haven't leveled my Paladin yet doesn't mean I don't like it.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure that's it. All right. Although a lot of people will actually argue that tanks are kind of similar. And I'm going to actually take the statement kind of close to word for word from Reddit, which was one of the people out there that gave us a pretty good question, named Clobberknock. Clobberknock.
It's a good name.
It's a good name. Very good name. The common argument for homogeneity among classes in a role that is makes it easier to balance, and it makes the classes mostly interchangeable. So basically, you can kind of interchange the tanks for whatever because they all kind of do the same thing. Given that the warrior is widely accepted as the strongest of the tanks in this content cycle, do you guys think that the different classes should play so similar, or is there room for mechanically diverse playstyles if there's always going to be a best class for any given encounter?
Start with Xeno, because I have a really long answer.
Okay, sure.
Well, my non-biased opinion, Warrior has always been the strongest, even in 2.1.
Okay,
But
I gotcha.
it's completely non-biased, completely. But no, I think that a lot of people, right, on the forums and on Reddit, I'm sure you guys have seen it, are all like, Warrior's too strong, blah, 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 they're overpowered. And no, they're really not. It's not that they're overpowered, it's that they're very well built. No other class in the game, outside of probably Scholar maybe, is even close to how well built that a warrior is. Like, everything a warrior does will synergize with everything else. Like, Berserk synergizes with almost everything. Raw Intuition, almost everything, because it all leads to stacks and doing damage. And you do damage and you mitigate damage at the same time. And it's like, that is why Warrior is so good. And a lot of people like to say that Fellcleave hits just a little too hard, 500 potency is a little too much. But actually, that's not the most, like, I guess if you're going to call it broken, in my opinion, that's not even the most broken thing about it.
Not even close.
Yeah, the most broken thing is it doesn't interrupt your combo. You can just You can be mid combo, fell cleave, infuriate, fell cleave. Oh look, I'll just reapply my eye because I'm mid combo. It doesn't matter, you know. Like it's just a very very well built class, and I think that instead of people looking at it from the perspective of, oh wow, this class is so overpowered, it's broken, blah blah blah, make the other tanks, you know, buff them or nerf warriors. They should actually take notes from how warriors built and put them into Paladin and Dark Knight. Because like right now, like Dark Knight doesn't synergize at all. It's trying to parry and evade at the same time. How the fuck do you parry and evade at the same time? It doesn't make any fucking and you're blinding enemies. So I guess you're blinding and trying to parry. I don't know how that works. So like whoever designed Dark Knight should just stop, please. And they should just have the guy that designed Warrior design Dark Knight.
You don't think it's the same person?
Like, huh?
You don't think it's the same person who designed it?
Fuck, no, it's not the same person. There's no way. There's no way.
Okay.
Well, okay, all right. If he did, he had an off day. And all right, I can accept that. Everybody has an off day. But no, like all jokes aside though, I think that Warrior is as good as it is because it synergizes so well, and almost no matter what you do, you're always mitigating or self-healing and doing a lot of damage. So you're always doing 2 to 3 different things at once. Whereas like the other tanking classes, you're kind of not. Like you're always just doing like 1, maybe 2 things at once, but like very rarely.
All right. Layla, your thoughts?
Okay, so I think I'll start off by saying that I think homogenizing the tanks would be bad, and I don't think that's a good direction to take the tanks. I do also agree that Warrior is designed very well. I think the only thing that I would say about Warrior's design that is a little obnoxious is the fact that Equilibrium is only on a 60-second cooldown. Equilibrium is incredibly strong.
It's so good.
It's so ridiculously strong. It's very not. It's underrated in the sense of how little it's talked about. So I think the 60-second cooldown of Equilibrium is a little nuts. But aside from that, Warrior is in a very good spot right now in terms of not only balance but design. In terms of his balance versus the other tanks, that's a bit questionable, but I would argue that that's questionable because of poor design in the other 2 tanks rather than Warrior. I want to talk specifically about Paladin and Dark Knight because of that. I think that there are some design choices they could have taken with the 2 classes to differentiate them from each other in Warrior, while also increasing their effects as tanks. There's a lot of cool things Paladin, for example. There's a lot of ways they could take Clemency and make it a much more interesting and desirable ability. Right now, the number of times a Paladin wants to use Clemency you can count on one hand. It has its uses in very specific situations, but it could be a more staple part of the class. I would take this for example. You could have a mechanic, you could have an interaction with the Paladin where maybe off of, and I'm not saying this would be balanced at all, but just gets the noggin thinking, gets the gears rolling. Maybe after a successful block, the potency and cast time, the potency of Clemency is reduced while the cast time is reduced. Increased and the cast time is reduced, sorry. Or maybe Clemency even becomes instant cast with the potency increase. You now have this sort of ability that you can weave into your tanking while not affecting your DPS or uptime of other abilities, applying debuffs or what have you. Because right now that's sort of one of Clemency's biggest problems. It's cutting into your debuff uptime and your overall DPS uptime. Whereas when you compare it to something like Equilibrium, which is just one button and you just healed for 9,000 HP every 60 seconds.
Right.
You tell me.
Yeah, that's not good at all or anything.
So there's things that they can do that make the classes unique that make them also more effective in tanking. Dark Knight has some really cool things that they could have done that I'm really surprised they didn't actually, because it's already a part of the class. They just took it in a different direction. And that's in things like Unleash procs. Right now, Dark Knight has this really awkward interaction between Unmend and Unleash that I don't really understand. It's the design choice behind it. Your Unmend has a chance to proc a free Unleash, and that's a very strange interaction that doesn't see much use in fights. I think back to the days of early 3.0 when Dark Knights were having all these TP issues due to blood weapon usage. And one of the solutions that I thought they might go with is, what if you incorporate a chance to proc something like a higher potency free Unleash when going through your standard rotation? Like, what if every time you crit, you have a chance to proc a free Unleash? What this does is you can compare it to a warrior. One of the reasons that warriors are so TP efficient, and they always have been, is because they spend globals on abilities that don't cost any TP, being Felcleave and Inner Beast, or Steel Cyclone and Decimate. That's spending a full global on an ability that doesn't cost any TP. You're now generating TP while doing damage. What they could have done to solve Dark Knight's TP issue is they could have done something similar, where you're tapping into this MP resource on a global that is normally going to be used by your TP resource, and you're dealing damage that way, or you're applying a debuff that way. Maybe Unleash now applies a debuff off of this proc. There are a lot of ways they can take these two classes that separate them from each other and warriors, while still making them desirable in fights. And I'd like to see them pursue ideas like that more. The clemency thing, I don't know if people are familiar with how protection paladins in World of Warcraft are, but it sort of reminds me of a protection paladin's interaction with Flash of Light in Mists of Pandaria. You have these instant cast heals that you incorporate into your tanking rotation, and the paladin could they could design a paladin with clemency like that, and I think it would be a really cool thing to have.
That sounds great. Talking about these changes too, we did discuss a good bit about how we can make it a little bit more balanced, but if someone wanted to go out and make a tank right now, are they imbalanced enough to where you'd say the only reason you would pick a Paladin or a Dark Knight is so you can complement your warrior? Is there enough of an imbalance out there that people should just only play those classes so they can complement a warrior to be in the group?
Well, a warrior is staple right now. Mm-hmm. I can tell you that. You're never going to want to take Paladin Dark Knight as a combo right now if you're wanting to take
it's funny?
progression any serious.
Shaman Arc, who comes on the show every once in a while, he was on the show with you last time. Yeah. His group does Paladin Dark Knight.
Oh, yeah, I know. We talked about that.
I thought it was pretty funny.
It's certainly not desirable.
Right.
No. In my eyes, warrior's just very staple. I'm sure Xeno can agree that Storm's Path is one of the best abilities in the game.
It's right.
It's ridiculous.
It takes two other classes to equal Storm's Path. Yeah. Come on.
Yeah.
I would say that Paladin and Dark Knight, they're not there to augment the warrior per se. They are there to augment the rest of the party in a supplement to what a warrior brings to the party. Sure, you're not going to have the net DPS of double warrior, but in terms of utility and defense, Paladin and Warrior and Dark Knight and Warrior work fine as in tandem with each other.
All right. Would you kind of agree with that too, Xeno? Okay.
Yeah, Warrior is definitely staple. If you're trying to do any type of aggression, you will always have a Warrior. Hands down, you will have a Warrior. Sometimes two Warriors.
Okay. So when you go into a fight, what is something that says, hey, I need to bring this tank composition with me? Is there something that, are you just like, oh no, always got to do Dark Knight, Warrior, that's the best composition every time? Or do you find these other things that kind of factor in while doing the fight that says, hey, this will be the optimal tanking composition to take for this fight? And this is something I think you have a lot of thoughts on, right, Layla?
Yeah, I mean, I can give a lot of insight, I guess, into this because of how big progression was, and why I play the game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Basically, I guess the point of the question is what decisions go into choosing a tank, what tanks to bring to a fight.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a couple different things that play into it. And the answer varied from Realm Reborn to Heaven's Ward. It changed from Realm Reborn to Heaven's Ward. Realm Reborn favored a defensive playstyle much more than an aggressive playstyle as a group. I'm not just talking about tanks.
Mm-hmm.
The rating meta for progression was defense first, offense later, and that was the blueprint that every group followed to be successful. And what did that translate into? Well, a lot of times that just translated into putting as many monks in your team as possible, because you've now just stacked mantras, and you now have DPS that can put on Fists of Earth and be almost as tanky as a warrior.
And Dragon Kick was amazing.
Yeah, and then you have Dragon Kick reducing magic damage. I'm being facetious, obviously.
Right.
Things like Black Mage for APOC, these are all really great defensive utilities that you want in your team. Now, that was the mindset of Realm Reborn. That mindset has changed, and it's changed. They forcibly changed it through Alexander Savage. As soon as A3 Savage was upon everyone, that defensive mindset had to be thrown out the window, and make way for the offensive overlords of Dark Knight, Dragoon, Ninja, and even Monk Ninja has its moments. But I guess to get back to the point of the question, why do we choose to bring a specific tank to a certain fight?
Mm-hmm.
Well, sort of like what I was getting into with A3 Savage. One of the things you want to weigh is how much damage each tank can do. That's something that you should have a metric for. You should have a measurement of how much damage can a Paladin do versus a Dark Knight versus a Warrior in X scenario. After Y amount of uptime. I would say that in the current scheme for rating right now, that's the foremost concern. Outside of very extreme scenarios of, this fight is pure magic damage, why do we not have a Dark Knight in our party?
Right.
There's no fight that's like that right now. Outside of maybe A1, Paladin A1 was, I think, objectively worse than Dark Knight. I don't think that that's even debatable. You could argue that Warrior was also a really strong composition to bring to A1, but bottom line is you didn't want to bring a Paladin to that fight. So I would examine things like DPS requirements. What certain tanks bring to the group in terms of utility, because, for example, the interaction between Monk and Dark Knight, they both have int debuffs. You don't need to bring 2 int debuffs to a party. So if your Dragoon Ninja variation is outperforming your Monk variation, then bringing in the Dark Knight allows you to maintain your utility while increasing your group's DPS. That's something a group might consider. And then you just have overall fight mechanics. Paladins, are very strong against physical damage because of Sheltron and Bulwark, even though Bulwark is oftentimes a lie. But then you have things like Dark Knight, where Dark Mind is actually a really strong ability. It's 60-second cooldown. That's really strong. Right. It's just like Equilibrium in that sense. Low cooldown, high reward. Dark Knights perform very well in A1 and A4, and even A3. They perform well in A3. Not just for their damage. Dark Mind has a lot of play in A3 as well. So those are some of the things that I think about, I guess, when deciding what's good for a fight.
Zeno, do you have any thoughts on that, or were you guys pretty much?
I think I completely agree with most of what Layla said, but I just like to add, I think it also depends if you go into a fight completely blind, because if you go into a fight completely blind, you don't really know like what is the best. So I think in that case, I think people should play on the classes that they're most comfortable with, because like if you go in on a class that you're not comfortable with, but just because it might be better, um, you're probably going to underperform actually, or at least in my experience. Because like let's say so take like my second raid group. Originally I leveled my other character to be a Dark Knight, but that yeah, that didn't really pan out. But anyway, yeah, but originally I was planning on playing a Dark Knight, and we already had a warrior. So ideally, in like A4, for example, um, it would probably be better for the Dark Knight to main tank in the last phase. Well, like I'm not exactly comfortable on Dark Knight as I am Warrior. So even though like because Dark Mind is so good, you have it up for you know all the perpetual rays and the tank buster in between. It's up for basically everything. Even though that's the case, I might not be as good on my Dark Knight as I am Warrior just because the comfort level is not there. So I think that like when you go in like blind, I think that originally before you try to, I guess, adjust the classes to fit the encounter better, I think it would be better to go in on the class that you're most comfortable with, and then kind of like, I guess, rework it like later, like after like 3 or 4 polls, or maybe like, you know, when people like, they notice something and they're like, wow, Dark Knight would be amazing because of this ability, or like Warrior would be awesome
Oh
because
yeah,
of this
sure.
here.
Yeah.
So like, let's switch up the way like we tank, you know, like typically you want like a Dark Knight to main tank, not because they're better, but because like you get like reprisal procs, you get all that kind of stuff. So you can like just
You just get
you
more
get free
return with them
damage.
tanking.
Oh,
Yeah.
what's that?
You just get more return from them
Yeah,
tanking.
yeah,
Just
yeah, yeah,
tanking.
exactly. But like in a case like A1, um, at the beginning of the fight, you don't really need like that much. Like you just want damage. You just want to push as hard as you can, because when it splits, it makes the fight so much easier. So in that case, or at least in my experience, I found it's better that the warrior pulls because it's higher damage. If the warrior pulls with Unchained, it's higher damage, it's higher aggro. Um, and I don't know, it's just like real like small things like that, I guess. So I guess it really just depends if you go in completely blind or if you go in already knowing. Like if you already know what you're going into, then I think it would be better to go with the best comp and just learn on that job, because your team will probably be the most successful, even if you're like slightly less comfortable with it, because you're learning it on that job. Um, I don't know. That's what I kind of think anyway.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, that mindset was also really prevalent in Realm Reborn specifically. You know, I was talking about the defensive party compositions were strong in Realm Reborn. It's because of that mindset of you take a composition into a fight that you feel can handle anything the fight throws at you, and you build off that from there. Um, and that's a really it's a good approach to really any fight, is cover all your bases going into it, and then trim down as you learn more and more about the fight.
Okay. And that kind of will go in a little bit to some of the other topics we're going to be talking about uh, when we start talking a little bit more about advice and everything with fights. One thing I wanted to bring up before we move on to that, though, is a statement I was actually talking to you a little bit, Zeno, and we kind of mentioned some things that might be relevant to the fact that they're changing, or they changed the limit break once. They flipped back. They said, all right, no, we don't like that, and they could put it back to what it was originally. The notes for that were really odd to me, but I did notice originally it was if you have 3 ranged, you're kind of just screwed. For a limit break, you're not completely screwed. You're just going to be behind. You're going to be gimped a little bit. And then it said, hey, 2 tanks, 2 healers. And so we're kind of going into the theory of, and this might not be the case. They might have changed it again, because again, it went back and forth, and I just had no clue what they were even saying about the limit break anymore when they converted it all the way back to what it was. Um, but if they said, hey, right now you can just bring 2 tanks of whatever, 2 melee of whatever, 2 healers of whatever, and 2 ranged of whatever, would people go in there with 2 warriors, 2 monks, 2 white mages, or 2 astros, I guess that would complement each other better, or 2 black mages, and just run with it because they're not getting any kind of penalty from it? And of course, this is just an example. I don't know if these are the best classes for that composition, but are we looking at that situation with maybe tanks going in with 2 warriors?
I think so. When I first heard that the next raid tier was going to be off physical or more physical, like just jokingly, I was like, well, double warrior is going to be the best comp. I was just joking. But then, like a month or two later, or whatever the fuck it was, they released that they've removed that double class limit break. I was like, oh my God, was I right when I said that? And I think that Thornton is a really good example, actually, because I've tanked Thornton on Paladin and Dark Knight, and I can 100% without a doubt in my mind say that tanking that fight on a warrior is beyond amazing in compared to Dark Knight. Dark Knights are terrible in that fight, in my opinion. They can't mitigate anything.
Really good off tanks, though.
Yeah. So, like, I guess if you just take Thornton as an example, like, let's say the next raid tier is going to kind of be like Thornton. I think the double warrior is going to be the best because because when you bring a Paladin, like, yeah, it's a lot of physical they can mitigate. Well, their damage fucking sucks. So a warrior can mitigate just as much. And they're going to do way more damage, and they're going to stance. And as an off tank, you're going to have access to both eye and path. So you don't have to worry about debuffs. You don't have to worry about aggro. You have two warriors that can, like, I mean, I don't see why you would need a tank swap in Thornton, but if for some reason you did, both have access to home gang. You can use them multiple times throughout the fight. So I think that, like, if the next raid tier is anything like Thornton, I think this is just my personal opinion. I could be really fucking wrong, but I think the double warrior is going to be a legit thing, and it could potentially be the best tank comp just based on that encounter.
Even with the fact that you're losing kind of a debuff by not having a variety of tanks, you think?
I like the only debuff that would really matter, I think, is Halone. But even then, like, you have Path. Like, Path is better than Halone and Delirium.
But if you double Path, I mean, that doesn't really stack up, right?
Oh, well, no, but you're guaranteed to have Path and Eye up 100% uptime. But the important thing is, I think the most important part about that is that a warrior will do more damage while tanking because they can stance, and they're going to mitigate just as much as, like, a Paladin, for example. So I guess, like, my mentality when I first learned Thornton was, like, why would you ever, like, if you're trying to do serious progression on Thornton, the best tank comp is double warrior. Because there's no reason to bring a Dark Knight, and there's no reason to bring a Paladin.
That's what we took in the Thornton.
Oh, yeah. Double warrior, yeah,
Yeah.
That's what we took in.
Nice.
So,
Layla, are you kind of on the same page with that, or?
Yeah, I am a little bit more empathetic to our Paladin brethren. But I think what it really comes down to is you have to weigh your group's desire or need for something like Divine Veil. I think Divine Veil becomes a key argument in Paladin's viability in fights these days. You have Divine Veil, and then you have is having a Halone debuff a necessity? Does having the Halone debuff net you enough leeway in terms of healing to make up the lost damage from not running double warrior, and potentially, depending on whatever they decide to do with their limit breaks, the 30% loss in LB gauge.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest with the proposed LB changes, they've flip flopped so much I don't even know what they've ended on. About halfway through it, I just lost all interest in paying attention to it, and I just decided I'll listen to it when they figure themselves out.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so I think we did a pretty good job kind of comparing things in a few different aspects here, and I do want to dive into the advice part because this is something that I'm really interested to hear, and I'm sure a lot of people are wanting to hear. So this is a lot of questions I'm getting from the community I feel like is worth discussing. First, right now tanks are completely convinced they should be DPS focused. Should tanks who are unfamiliar with fights start off trying to go max DPS to see where they can push their limits, or should they be more conservative? Hey, let me learn to fight and figure out what's going on. But I'll just go ahead and pass that off to you guys so you can let me know.
Go ahead, Zeno.
Yeah, definitely more conservative. At least that's how I approach stuff. If you go into an encounter blind, you know nothing about it. Starting out with your DPS stance, like full slaying, that's really stupid because you don't even live long enough to see what you need to live through. Like, that's why crafted are so good, because crafted let you live, like they have so much vit and so much strength. So at least in my experience, like I always approach very, very conservatively. Like, I killed Thornton probably 10, 12 times before I even started to stance in the final phase, just because I wanted to be 100% certain that I knew everything I needed to know. And it was, I mean, like the way I look at it is, if you're like a newer tank or new to the encounter, you should always try to live as long as you can, to see the mechanics, to see what you need to live through. Because the more that you like see that, the more you can start to think, oh, you know what? I really don't need Defiance here, or I really don't need Shield Oath here. You know, and then you can also use your big defensive cooldowns really, really soon in the fight, because you know they're going to be up later when you like need them. So like, I don't know, for example, I just keep saying Thornton because that was a recent encounter that came out. But like, for example, just the way I personally use my cooldowns, I use Vengeance in my opener, because you don't need it until the Knights. So if you use it, boom, right at the start, you're going to be mitigating a lot of damage. You're going to be dealing a lot of damage, because Vengeance, a lot of people don't realize how much damage Vengeance actually does to the enemy.
Oh, it does a lot, yeah.
But yeah, but yeah,
Especially
so
when
like,
it's Berserk.
oh yeah, that's the best. But yeah, so it's like, but I didn't go into the fight with that knowledge. I stayed in Defiance pretty much the entire time when I was learning, and then slowly I was like, okay, you know, I can really Deliverance this whole first phase pretty much after my opener, and then wow, I don't even need Deliverance for this Knight that's hitting me with this Blade Dance. And then now, like, I'm literally only really in Defiance when Unchained is up, in all honesty. And it's just because, like, I approached the fight very conservative level, and I learned what I needed to mitigate first. Because I think if you go in there with full DPS, like that mentality, I think you'll die to a lot of stuff that you shouldn't be dying to, and you won't actually learn how to survive it properly. Or at least that's, I guess, like each person learns differently, but that's how I learn, I guess.
I've actually found a situation. This is mainly relevant to me because I've grouped with a lot of tanks, pugging for Thornton and other things. And I notice people just go in, I need to do max DPS constantly. They don't think about anything else in the fight. They're just like, I'm going to be judged by how much DPS I do. And then they die, and it's not their fault. It's the healer's fault for not being able to keep up with them and keeping up the meta. And so
that's dumb.
I definitely want to go over this point. And Layla, do you have more thoughts on that?
I mostly echo what Zeno was saying. I guess the one thing that I would say is evaluating cooldowns and such is sort of a constantly evolving thing, because we've been talking about Thornton a lot, so I can use this for example. When I do agree that playing conservatively should be your primary goal. Your goal during progression is to see as much of the fight as you can, and mitigating as much as you can is going to get you through the fight. It's going to get you to a further point in the fight than not. When you have a fight like Thornton, though, you do have these interactions where when you are playing really conservatively and doing less damage, Thornton has that what's the tank buster called? Heavenly Heal? Heaven's Heal?
Yeah.
Thornton has that early Heavenly Heal in the opening phase. If you are playing conservative, you might get that tank buster that you normally probably you won't be getting on later. when you get more comfortable with the fight. So like Xeno was saying, you generally don't need Vengeance until the double Knights spawn. But maybe if you're dealing with that tank buster early on, maybe you would want Vengeance there, so you would be using it there and then not being able to use it in your opener. So that is something that would change your cooldown usage, and then as you evolve your game and lower the amount of conservation in your game, you're going to also have to be reevaluating your cooldowns. So that's sort of what I'm getting at when it's an ever-evolving process, learning a fight in that regard, and dropping your level of conservation as you approach it. But always start very conservative so that you can learn the fight and get through as much of it as quickly as possible.
Yeah. I think we need a star that just comes over the screen and says the more you know, because I mean it feels like this is a public message that just needs to go out there for a lot of tanks out there. Go into fights if you don't know it. Try to be conservative.
What's interesting to me, so sorry to interrupt, but what's interesting to me is there are a lot of times, and I don't know if Xeno gets this too, but there are a lot of times where people are surprised at how conservative I play Warrior, because they think world first clears, he must really favor DPS and just want to push phases and push big numbers. But in reality, I play more conservative than a lot of Warriors I know, even compared to most Warriors in my FC. I'm one of the more conservative ones, and there's definitely something to be said about that. There's strength in approaching tanking with conservation.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, you need to do more DPS if you're not hitting a DPS check.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And really, if you die and wipe because you don't have the right cooldown and the heal is just not timed perfectly with it and you're learning to fight, that's one less attempt you have of practice.
Yeah, so one thing, and this is sort of getting off topic, but I do want to highlight it before I forget, because I'll forget. When I am sort of trying to balance the mitigation versus offense and become more comfortable with a fight, when I'm looking for areas to improve my damage, I'm going to look at areas first that don't negatively affect my mitigation. I'm going to look for areas in the fight where it's completely harmless to go in Deliverance, or it's this spot in the fight, I can get a full uptime of Berserk without any worry of needing to mitigate a Tank Buster or enter Defiance or an IB. Those are the things I'm looking at to improve my DPS, instead of I actually don't need IB to live through this Tank Buster. I can actually live through it with 15% HP just by using these cooldowns. That's not something I want to encourage when I'm tanking. I more want to first examine the things that don't negatively affect my damage, or don't negatively affect my mitigation, excuse me, and then, if still necessary, then start pulling punches and lowering mitigation in areas that I deem fit to decrease Defiance uptime.
All right.
I think just to add on to that, I think I pretty much have the same mentality. The first place I look though is for like DPS checks and stuff, because if you take the hands in turn 3, right? If you're not in your if you're in your tanking stance when you're tanking those two, you're fucking up. You really need to do as much damage as possible, or at least an early progression you did. I remember having to LB one of the hands just to kill it in time, and that wouldn't have been possible without popping literally every single cooldown I had while in Deliverance, except for Vengeance and Thrill. So the first place I look to start improving my damage is DPS checks, and where there's going to be no consequence or no tank busters to kill me when I'm in my Deliverance stance.
Okay. That's really good advice too, with learning cooldowns. I think that's kind of the main point that you also wanted to cover too, Layla, was kind of how cooldowns are analyzed when you're doing a fight, right? You just...
yeah, I mean that's definitely a sub point of it. There is more that goes into planning cooldowns when you're learning a new fight. I don't know if you want to get into that right now.
Let's see. Depends on if you guys have time or not.
Oh, I'm fine on time. I don't know how.
Man, I got all night.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
do that.
So I mean, I guess what Frosty's alluding to is, one of the things that I recommended that we talk about tonight would be how you approach a new fight as a tank, and we've sort of scratched the surface of this in terms of going in offense versus defense. But there's more that goes into a fight than just that. There's a lot of planning of cooldowns, not just DPS cooldowns, offensive cooldowns as well. We've sort of talked about this, but not specifically defensive cooldowns. And the ordering and cooldown rotation that someone creates for a fight is very important. And you have fights that have sometimes a fight has a static phase, and sometimes it has a phase that's determined by DPS. So your cooldown rotation is going to need to be evolving and changing as it goes on. A lot of times it comes down to, like, how should I explain this? It's sort of like a priority list of cooldowns. The general takeaway is you want to get the most value out of your cooldowns over a certain amount of time. And what does that mean? Well, that means there might be a cooldown rotation. I could think of turn 13, for example, where if you're doing, oh God, I haven't done turn 13 in so long. What is the tank? Flatten, right?
Yeah,
It's the tank
flatten.
master?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're doing a, I feel it's so foreign to me. I think it was a 4 flatten rotation was pretty normal for a while for most groups, I think. If I get that wrong, somebody's gonna make fun of me. But
I think it was 3.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was
Was it
3,
three?
and then you were trying to
I
push
think
and
so,
not hit the third one.
because it was like
So-
Rampart on the first one, then Sentinel on the second one, and then like the third one was like, ooh,
now
better
was
hope
that
this
was that
bulwark
later?
works.
Was that much later on, or was that early turn 13 that it was 3?
Early was 3, I think. You had to hit 3. I'm
Yeah, I
assuming.
thought early was 3 because
Okay.
ideally you wanted to push the third one.
Okay. Well, this is a terrible example then, because I was
Okay.
going off of a 4 flatten example. But
Okay.
um,
Or let's just imagine a world with
let's
4.
pretend a world
Yeah.
exists where you get 4 flattens in turn 13. Okay.
Okay.
This is the world we live in right now.
Okay.
Rough
You know,
world.
Yeah, that's a rough
Yeah.
world. I don't want to live there.
Yeah.
But the point that I'm trying to make is there are rotations you can make where if you don't use Sentinel as your force as part of your first set of cooldowns for flatten number 1, you're potentially throwing away a Sentinel for the final flatten. Those are the kinds of things that you want to take into consideration when you're designing a cooldown rotation for a fight. You want to get the most value out of your cooldowns as possible. If you do a Rampart only on the first flatten, and then like a Sentinel on the second, and a Foresight Bulwark Rampart on the third, you've thrown away a potential Sentinel and Bulwark. The Bulwark might be a bad example because you generally don't want to stack Sentinel with Bulwark. It's kind of awkward and bad to do. But
Right.
but you get where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
You don't want to be throwing away extra value in terms of mitigation, and you want to have enough knowledge about the tank busters in a phase to be able to come up with an optimal cooldown rotation. And how do we learn about the tank busters in a phase? Well, you start the fight playing conservatively. You play very defensively. You learn about the amount of tank busters that are going to be thrown at you over a certain amount of time, so that you can then start collecting information, so you can start building this cooldown rotation. And this all goes into how you learn a fight as a tank. And I just thought it would be important to highlight that.
Yeah. No, that
Yeah,
makes
like
sense.
ideally, like you never want to waste, or not really waste, but you never want to lose an activation on a cooldown. So like, let's say, so like that perfect example would be like the Thornton, right? Eventually I started using Vengeance at the very start because it's up when I need it again. Well, originally when I learned the fight, I didn't do that because I wanted to save it. So essentially, in the grand scheme of things, like the whole fight, when I learned it, I lost a Vengeance activation.
Yeah.
Whereas now, I fully utilize Vengeance every time it's available when I need it.
That's
so
very
like
important
those,
evaluation for equilibrium
yeah,
as well.
yeah. So those, like all those little things like that, they really, really add up. And not only do they like make your life easier, but they also let you like tank in your DPS stance as well. So it's like you're killing like two birds with one stone. And worst case scenario, like let's say like some shit happens, boom, like half the party's dead. You still have that cooldown available, and you can just stay in your tanking stance. So now you're like super, super tanky.
Yep.
So like, yeah, when you approach a fight like that, it really makes a difference, I think.
Yeah. I know back, and this was back in 2.0, I would see it all the time. I don't know if I see it anymore, but not 2.0, but 2.x. Tanks would come in and they would say, all right, here's a tank buster. I have a cooldown for it, and they make the cooldown. They forget all the smaller cooldowns they have throughout the entire fight. They only focus, this needs to be sentineled, this needs to be inner beast, this needs to be whatever, and they forget they have all these other little things they could be using and weaving in between all the fight to overall reduce the damage. And I think that that's something that people should be looking into too, but I don't know. I haven't tanked since 2.5.
Yeah, I think the goal is to never be sitting on your cooldowns for longer than their
Longer than the
time.
cooldown duration.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
and that
like
works for
longer
every
than their
class, every job.
Yeah, like it also like it just like how I activate Berserk actually is a good example, because I typically will save internal release for Berserk. Like even though internal release is 30 seconds shorter, I'll save it for Berserk. I do more damage when I do that, because like if you crit with a Berserk Fell Cleave, that's so much, that's unreal. But like ideally, if there's a phase, for example, right, that's, we'll say it's 70 seconds, so you're not going to get a Berserk window in that phase. So it's okay to use, it's okay to use that internal release, because you'll use it and it will come back up again when your Berserk is available to use. So you can say the same thing about DPS cooldowns. Like I'm not sure if it works like that with all the other DPS, because I don't play a lot of DPS, but I will also typically save my internal release for Blood on Monk. I don't know if that's optimal, but I typically do. I do pretty good damage, so I think it's kind of good. But like, so like I think that you can use that mentality on defensives and apply it to offensive cooldowns as well sometimes.
No? Yeah. All right. So now that we're kind of talking about a little bit of this as well, I want to actually wondered if you guys have any tips off the top of your head for certain fights like Savage, A1, A2, A3, A4, and Thoradin that you could give to people who might be struggling with those fights. And I know it's going to be more warrior-based tips. I know, although you guys, how many times have you guys cleared it with a different tank besides warrior?
I played.
Go ahead.
I play Dark Knight pretty frequently.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't leveled Paladin yet. I do want to. I do want to. Hey,
I'm sure you do.
Hey, man, I played Paladin in 2.x, and it's way better now. So I'd probably enjoy it a lot now. It has two other combos, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've taken Dark Knight through some Savage turns. My Paladin, I haven't taken Paladin through Savage. I have it 60, and I played it extensively at 60, but taking it through Savage, not yet. I played Paladin a lot in Realm Reborn, though.
Okay.
So I do have an understanding of the class.
Right. So let's talk about A1 a little bit, and just what are some tips that people who are first getting into Savage, this is their initiation into Savage, this is where like, oh, things kill me and I have to pay attention a lot. What are some things that tanks should just know about that fight that could improve the chances that they'll clear that?
Well, A1, warriors are king. You can super cooldown every single tank buster from A1.
Are we going to start any conversation without saying that though?
No, I mean it just needs it needs to be understood that warriors are king.
Okay.
I mean, let's not dance around. Let's not beat around the bush right now. I mean,
Okay, I got you.
The elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I would say to plan out your cooldown rotation so that if you're not a warrior, use your immunities. Be able to super cooldown as many tank busters as you can, while also using your immunity to fill the gap of the cooldowns that are now on cooldown. Paladin being able to HG the second tank buster. I'm assuming somebody who's just starting this fight is not going to be only getting 2 tank busters. They're probably going to be seeing 3 or so. So super cooldown in the first set, HGing the second, and super cooldown in the third set is a great way to go through the fight as a paladin. Same thing could be said about Dark Knight. Warriors, we just have it easy. We just super cooldown every single one because too many cooldowns.
Yeah. And super cooldown, he means like the invincibility move.
Well, no, super cooldown. When I'm talking about here is popping everything you have available. So a super cooldown for a warrior would be Thrill, Vengeance, IB. If you want to foresight a magical move, sure, why not?
It makes you feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like the way warriors cooldowns line up, that's another really awesome thing about warrior is their cooldowns. They're not too long, but they're not too short either. They're right there in the middle.
It's one of their strengths that don't get talked about is the cooldown values of warriors' abilities across the board are very favorable for progression, especially home gang. Home gang doesn't get
it's amazing.
The low cooldown, I sometimes prefer it to Hallowed. I don't know. That's a bold statement. Hallowed's pretty good, but low cooldown.
Now with Equilibrium, I think it's better.
Yeah, it arguably can be. Yeah, Equilibrium's 60-second cooldown though is a little obnoxious.
All right.
Yeah, but ideally though, those hyper compressed plasmas are like what 2 minutes and 5 seconds I think apart from each other.
2 minutes and 10, something like that.
Yeah. So you literally have every single cooldown imaginable for that. You can even use raw intuition for the auto attack that follows if you want to. It doesn't matter.
Get a stack from that IB. Sure, why not?
Yeah, fuck it. You need one more stack? Just use that for Inner Beast. Whatever, you're good.
Though I do find myself generally using raw intuition on that fight to maintain my stacks through the jump phases because the way the jump phases are like just barely long enough for you to lose stacks. So having raw intuition available for that and it doesn't really help you very much in the fight anyway. It's very rare circumstances it can help you, but it's a nice little thing that warriors can do. It's just a warrior tip.
Yeah, like I'll typically save raw intuition so I can triple fell cleave. But yeah, like those jump phases are actually pretty annoying because it's like your stacks are like 30 seconds, right? And the phase is like, I don't know, what, 32?
Like 33 or something. It's
it's like you can get a heavy swing. And then
the heavy swing
right
animation
as you're
goes
about
off
to name, your stacks fall, and you get really sad.
Minus wrath, minus abandon.
Yeah.
All right. Have you guys done it with Dark Knight that you feel confident with giving some tips out about that?
Yeah, I have a lot. Dark Knight's really awesome in that fight because you have Dark Mind. You can literally like if you pop you can have Rampart, Shadow Wall, and Dark Mind up for the first and third one, and like you don't even have to be in grit, and you only take like 8,000 damage because it's like what 30% plus 20 plus 30, so like you don't even have to be in grit really, and then you can just living dead the second one, and then all your shit's back up for the third one. So I mean, even on Dark Knight, because it just so happens that ability is a magic-based ability. If it wasn't a magic-based ability, then they would go back to having two cooldowns instead of 3. But because it is magic, it's really amazing. And I mean, fuck it, you could even be in grit and take like literally 0 damage. Like Chet, the co-tank in my first group. I mean, he's literally taken 0 damage off of that ability before. Just because like when we were learning, he got like a crit ad low. He had Mind, Shadow Wall, Skin, and Grit on, and he literally just took nothing. So,
all right. So we're just gonna nix Paladin tips off from this one. Unless if you guys want to.
We talked about it a little bit. It's very similar to what he was talking about with Dark Knight in terms of planning out your cooldowns. You want to stack your super cooldowning, and then while you're waiting for your cooldowns to come back, you have the hollowed to fill. For the second tank buster, and then by the third tank buster, your sentinel is going to be back. Your rampart's been back for a while. You can actually use the rampart on a cleave earlier on because of that being able to use hallowed on the second one. It's just planning out your cooldowns in a manner that you get the most out of them.
Yeah, I think like actually of all the fights in Savage, that mechanic damage, that compressed plasma is actually the most balanced for every single tank. I mean, I know it's magic, but it's like the way that the tanking cooldowns work, you can have everything up for the first one, you can cheat the second one, and then
Yeah.
have everything up for the third one across all the tanks.
I don't know if that's a good thing though, because that spawns out of the linearity of the fight, and the fight is just so linear that it creates that dynamic for you. So while the dynamic is good, that you can bring any of the tanks to the fight, and they'll be as good as as dealing with that tank buster as the other ones. That is sort of one of the things that I disliked about the fight. Is just how linear it was.
Yeah, I think like I do, yeah, I do agree with you, but I think that it's okay because it was the first turn. I
Yeah,
think that if it
I
was maybe like
I can get
turn
behind that.
three or something,
That'd be unacceptable.
yeah, but like I think since it's the first turn, because I think like ideally the first turn is supposed to like be somewhat easy because it's supposed to like build you up. You're supposed to build momentum off of killing the first turn. So you go into the second one, you're like, yeah, we fucking got this, guys. We just beat this first turn. We got this shit, you know. So I think like
And then
for
you
the
go this
first
whole
turn it's
drop down
okay.
of like, oh, this is not a really fun fight when you get into A2.
Oh, I
Get off that
I
high pretty
hate
quick.
I had fun at it too.
Oh man, I don't know what it is about that fight. I think it's the go-kart. It's so gimmicky. I absolutely hate that. That's the whole nother story though. I hate that fight so much.
I mean, I thought it was a fun idea. I feel like it just didn't. I was killing trash. That's all it felt
Yeah,
like.
so you talked. I remember the last time I was on the show, you were complaining that you didn't actually fight a boss in
Right.
A2. It was just mobs. It was just
Yeah.
trash, and I can see why that would bother some people. Sure, but
Yeah.
I liked the cart mechanic.
It was. I mean, I was the guy
Maybe
in
I'm
the
the weird
cart,
one.
so.
I think actually the most annoying thing about turn two for me is, and this is probably just because like I tank it, but the mobs they like push each other out of the way, like nonstop. The Gob Widows push everything out of the way, and like when you drag everything from the right side to the left in that corner of death or whatever, like the hard mine and the hard helm, they just come barreling in, you know, like Donkey Kong, and they just push everything out of the way. I don't know. I thought that the fact that they pushed the other mobs out of the way was just so irritating to me. It's probably like a pet peeve or like a small thing, but it's just, oh man, that just completely ruined it for me.
I mean, also going into that fight, tanking it, and I don't have that experience, but I mean, a lot of the time the enemies are just stunned. Like you guys aren't really tanking much,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that was another thing I didn't really like. Yeah, actually, yeah, we were talking about this last night. Um, Another thing I didn't really like about A2, and this is just all like my personal opinions or whatever, you know, but most of the waves, you actually aren't even fighting anything. You're just doing diadem, like little mini diadem pieces. You're just like attacking stun mobs that don't really do anything back to you. And I don't know, I found that like really boring. When you stun like a whole wave of enemies that are completely helpless, there's essentially no mechanics.
Feeling
You're
bad for the
just
enemies.
AoEing. Huh?
You feel bad for the enemies being completely
No,
helpless.
I would rather not be in that encounter, but
I
I
got you.
just think it's really boring. I think it's too gimmicky with the go kart. Like I really like turn four, so I probably went in with the wrong mentality. Actually, it's probably my own fault because I went in thinking, oh man, A4 or turn four was awesome, so this is going to be awesome. And A2 is actually quite a bit different than A4 or
Then
Which
turn
turn
four,
one?
yeah.
two, A turn whatever.
I gotcha.
But yeah, so
The other
I think
gauntlet.
yeah, I
Oh
think
yeah,
I
turn
just
four.
went in with
Gotcha.
the wrong mentality from the get go.
Okay. Layla, going in as progression and trying to learn to fight and find out like the best mechanics, was that the most enjoyable part of it, or what are the reasons you kind of enjoyed it while progressing?
So we I haven't really talked about this before. It doesn't really relate to tanking, but I guess I can talk about it for a minute.
Hmm.
Um, Probably the reason that I enjoyed A2 as much as I did is when we were preparing for Savage in my team, we spent a lot of time in normal in the 2 weeks beforehand. We wanted to have a complete understanding of what the normal fights had in them, and what we wanted to start thinking about what could they throw at us in Savage. And one of the wild cards for us was A2, because when you have a gauntlet fight like that, especially when you're adding an element of a vehicle to it, which can be piloted by any member of your party at your choosing, we didn't know what they were going to throw at us with A2. So we actually spent way more time on A2 than 1, 3, or 4. Practicing it, making sure that everyone in the team was comfortable at driving the car, because we didn't know if it was going to be a necessity in Savage to have a specific player drive the car at a specific time, if one class was going to be better at it than another. I just had a lot of fun with my team, going through A2 and theory crafting what could possibly happen in Savage, and I think it reflected, and this is why I probably enjoyed it too as much as I did. I think it reflected because I feel that A2 was one of our strongest performances in this last tier. We really made up a lot of ground in that fight. We lost A1 by 7 minutes, and then we won A2 by a full hour. And it was nothing more than a product of the amount of time we put in the 2 weeks beforehand. So that's why I think I liked A2 and wasn't biased against it. I guess it wasn't really tanking related or anything.
That's actually a really cool perspective. Yeah, because see, when I learned A2, it wasn't like that at all. So, yeah, maybe if I would have experienced that, I would have liked it a lot more. Because because my group, they just went in blind and we were miserable.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that could be pretty miserable. Yeah, if you didn't have any practice with the carts or anything. But getting back to the topic that we were talking about earlier with tips for some of these Savage turns. We talked a lot about A1. We can talk some about A2. I can give and Xeno can as well. Some basic warrior advice for the fight, and it's very straightforward in the sense of you're going to be pressing overpower a lot, a lot. So because of that, equilibrium uptime is very, very, very key, and the deliverance equilibrium, the TP restore. And the one thing that I tell every warrior who's going into A2 and learning it is make sure you pay attention to your equilibrium uptime. Make sure you're getting as much TP from equilibrium as you can throughout the fight, because nothing affects your performance in A2 more than your uptime of equilibrium. And missing out on an equilibrium cooldown or missing it by 30 seconds because you weren't paying attention hurts you so much more than anything else in that fight, just because of how much you're actually AoE tanking and AoE DPSing. So that's
I would
definitely
say
one thing.
that's arguably the most important cooldown, or the most management, I think.
All right.
Regarding Dark Knights and Paladins, we were I don't know if we were the odd men out. I didn't really get to pay much attention to the other groups who were doing A2 because we were struggling with A3 at the time. But we did favor Paladin at lower gear levels compared to Dark Knight, particularly because of the quad jags. Maybe if a team is low gear levels like we were, they might not want to go into the fight with a Dark Knight right away, even though the Dark Knight is the superior option these days because of the damage it does. I think at really low gear levels, you might find that having the Paladin extra physical damage mitigation crutch and hollowed crutch might produce an easier kill than a Warrior Dark Knight combination. But then again, maybe you just run double Warrior and not care.
Yeah, we had the same mentality. We ran Warrior Paladin in A2, but a friends group, they ran double Warrior, and we wish that we would have ran double Warrior.
I'm thinking about it more, and I just the LB, the diminished LB gauge on that fight, because of how we used our LB, we kind of pooled our LB for a while. I don't think it would have affected us that much, and I am pretty sure we would have pushed phases significantly faster with double Warrior. So Double Warrior might have actually been a very desirable option at that point. Unfortunately for us, like Double Warrior wasn't it wasn't viable for our team at that time because so much time went into preparation for the patch. We weren't able to level every class on every one of our alts, so we were kind of pigeonholed into certain combinations in some areas. We tried to give ourselves as many options as possible, but one of the things that we weren't able to do was run Double Warrior, and that was one of the things that we had to cut from the laundry list.
Huh.
Yeah, because it was like that first week, the LB, I don't even think it like barely got under 2. I
I
think
don't
so.
even remember where we used it, but I think it was really towards the end of the fight.
Yeah, because we used ours out on the very last wave when everything is over in that corner, and
Yep.
we normally only had
Mage
one.
LB?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it
we
was
did the
only
same.
Mage LB 1 because we had like one and like three-fourths of a bar. So it was like you were in that awkward state where it's like, well, do we wait? But if we wait, everything's going to be unstunned, or do we just say fuck it and use it and like waste three-fourths of an LB? So like we were kind of in that awkward state. Um, but yeah, like I really don't think because like thinking about it now, Double Warrior would have definitely been the best because the
Yeah.
LB penalty
I'm
would
starting to lean that way.
yeah. The LB penalty would have been
You
nothing.
wouldn't have even noticed it.
Yeah.
Well, now we know this. We've learned something from this discussion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. There we go.
Unfortunately, it just wouldn't have been a viability for us just because we didn't have access to it
Right.
during Prague.
Yeah. Okay. So going past this and going into A3, which is what everyone is really hitting and struggling with right now, and I'm assuming you guys will probably have the most tips for A3 because there's a lot of things I learned just
Warrior
playing.
tips.
Warrior tips for sure.
Yeah.
And so, by the way, you guys watching this, yeah, we're giving a lot of warrior tips out there, which means equates we're giving a lot of tank tips out there. So,
Yeah, these days certainly, yeah.
yeah,
There's warrior at every team, so
exactly,
every team is at least benefiting in one way.
exactly.
A3. I don't know if other teams felt this way, but I feel like I could just write a script at this point that plays A3 for me. It feels like I have every global just memorized just from
Yep.
having to do the fight so many times.
Yeah.
I think about tips that I could, offer to people who are going through A3. And we kind of highlighted this when we were talking about some other stuff earlier, but you want to look for, obviously one of the major problems, not problems, excuse me, but one of the major struggles with the fight for groups is the DPS check, and balancing that DPS check with the mechanics that you're having to deal with. My advice for a warrior tanking that fight is to look for safe, plan your berserks out so that your berserks are always in deliverance. That's a very key one. And look for areas in the fight where you can get away with 20 seconds of deliverance without hurting your mitigation too much, because that's a tall task. What I just said. There's only, I think, 2 spots in the fight where there's a clear, safe spot of you don't get tank cleaved at all for 20 seconds, and that's on the 2nd and 5th cascades. In between swipes 2 and 3, you have a full 20 seconds where you don't get cleaved again, and that's actually where I placed one of my deliverance berserks. So look for areas like that while still not losing the number of berserks you have in a fight, because that's important. So map out your berserks. Also, like Xeno was talking about earlier, there's a portion of the fight where the hands split up into 2 hands, and it's a very, very key part of the fight when you're chasing the mage, because there's a lot of damage cleaving you can get there, and you want to be dealing as much damage as your group is capable of during that phase of 2 adds. There is the threshold that you have to make on one of the adds to get through the check. If you're familiar with the fight, you'll know what I'm talking about. But you want to get one thing that I like to do is when the hands, before they cast equal concentration, I have my rotation set up so that I actually get 4 overpowers in the hands when they're stacked. I refresh MAME, go into 4 overpowers, and then get a Berserk Decimate on them as they're casting equal concentration. And that's sort of how I mapped that out. I would encourage, tanks to really be thinking about how they can maximize as much damage as they can on those double hands, because that's a really easy spot to gain a lot of damage in the fight. And this is all, chasing the goal of the tough DPS check that the fight is. There are other tips that we can offer in regards to mitigation. Look to maintain Storm's Path on every cascade, because that's going to make your DPS be able to blood for blood pretty freely. What are some other good ones? I'll let Xeno have the rest of the A3 discussion. I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
I think there's a lot of damage in the last phase of the encounter that at first it can be scary, but if you try it, you'll see that the boss actually doesn't do that much damage in the final phase, like with his cleaves. He doesn't do near as much damage as like the 2 hands, for example. So when
especially phase 1 and 2.
Yeah. In the final phase, he just doesn't do as much damage, at least to the main tank, as he does like in previous phases, or at least I found. So what Layla was talking about, like with your Berserk timings, it's so imperative that you only Berserk when you're in Deliverance, and make sure that you get the full 20 seconds. Because if you use Berserk, like we'll say on the first cascade, you're going to get interrupted by the polarities. So you're going to miss like 2 or 3 GCDs. Like I found
Save
out,
your Berserk.
Yeah, like I found that out the hard way. Like it only took once, and I was like, wow, I'm never fucking using that there again. And ideally, you can, if you take the first cleave just raw, you can pop your Berserk, and you can triple fell cleave while using raw intuition as not only a stack to increase your damage, but also mitigation. So yeah, that is a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier. Why warriors are so well built is because you do 2 things at once. When you use that raw intuition there, you give yourself a stack. You're increasing your damage. That stack is so important, because that one stack allows you to triple fell cleave in 1 Berserk window. So that's a free 500 potency move, as opposed to, let's say you fracture, so you lose 200 potency, or you Storm's Eye, you're going to lose like 230. So that one stack is severely important there. And also you're still mitigating a lot of damage, because it's all physical. So every single cleave, every single auto is 20% less. And then by the time that wears off, you have 2 options. You can either thrill in Convalescence, or you can just go in Defiance and just Unchained if you're not feeling 100% comfortable. So even if you Unchained, you're still doing full damage there.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really important, because the DPS check is really tight. Like that fight, I mean, it's like, so my groups, it's not really as intense. Like it's not really intense anymore. But like to a lot of other groups, it's still a legit thing. Like I see streams all the time that wipe at like 1%. And I think that if tanks would try to utilize their cooldowns like in that way, those wipes wouldn't happen. Because like when I see like tanks doing like 4 and 500 DPS, that's not going to cut it in A3 and A4. Like they need to improve that. It's probably okay in A1 and 2, just because A1 and 2 they're relatively simple terms. But in A3 is when like tank DPS is mandatory. And when something like that becomes mandatory, you have to start thinking about all those little tiny interactions. Like what Layla said, overpower like 3 or 4 times. And like that will matter in the last phase. That will matter. And like triple fell cleaving will matter. And I think it's like planning out your cooldowns in that last phase while doing as much damage as possible is very important because essentially you can save your vengeance for the tether. Like I just take the tether with APOC and vengeance in deliverance. And like I don't even need APOC if I have an Adlo. As long as I have either a Stone Skin, an Adlo, or APOC with vengeance, I'll live every time. And I have like full slain. So it's just I think as long as you save your vengeance for those tethers, like you'll be fine. And this also goes back to the cooldown timers of warriors. Because they're not too long, they're up for pretty much whenever you need them. And they also allow you to tank in deliverance while still being tanky at the same time. And if you ever feel like you're uncomfortable, you can always go unchained because you're still maintaining all of your damage.
Yeah.
So like it's all those little things that will literally increase your DPS by 200, 300, 400 damage per second sometimes.
Alright.
Yeah, these are good pieces of advice, and they're also like applicable to pretty much every encounter you approach as a warrior. When you talk about Unchained, there are portions of encounters. I think of very key moments of doing A4 with Nissi. There are a lot of circumstances where I want to stay in Defiance. I do not want to be out of Defiance because I want this health buffer because there's a 3500 Nissi taking on me, and I've talked about this a little bit last time and before, but the only thing you have to combat Nissi is HP. It's not reducible by percent mitigation. You want to, anytime a fight forces you into Defiance, you want to have your Unchained available for that. You want to be placing your Unchains in areas where there's just no other option than Defiance. And looking for those areas and planning those out. You guys might be sensing a theme here. Warrior DPS and mitigation. It's mostly just a lot of planning ahead. It's a lot of planning ahead before the pull, and it's a lot of planning ahead in the fight. And what I mean by that, I mean thinking ahead about your stacks, managing your stacks as you go along, based on what's happening in the fight. Just plan out your Unchains, your Berserks, your Wrath builders like Vengeance and Raw Intuition. When you start really looking at what a fight is going to throw at you and when, you'll be able to have really good results just from planning alone.
All right. Well, speaking of which, we can kind of jump into A4 real quick. And maybe, is there any in particular points in that fight that you feel that any tank should know, hey, this is how you can improve on it, other than what we said?
I'll let Xeno talk for a while. I'm going to think about this one. Take your time, please.
I absolutely hate A4. I have never done Nissi. I don't want to do Nissi. You are amazing for doing Nissi. But
please don't remind me.
Yeah, but
remind me.
I don't care about Nissi. I don't want to do Nissi. If I was forced to do Nissi, so let's say like the Royal Pentacle was spaced too far apart for whatever reason, and I was forced to, then yes, I would learn it. I would be interested in it because that would be how to clear the fight. But and this is just my personal opinion. People may have different opinions, but I absolutely hate A4. I think it's boring. I hate the fight. I hate the way it looks. I hate the camera angle. Whoever thought camera angles would be an issue in an MMO? That just perplexes me. I don't think going from Bahamut to that is like, no.
Okay, yeah.
And like for me, like I'm old as fuck, right? I'm like 30, so I come from like, Sega and Super, right? And I mean even Nintendo. So like the whole cool factor and like I guess like Final Fantasy lore, if you want to call it, like that means something to me. That's really important to me.
Bahamut is extremely interesting and fun to chase. Chasing goblins and cheese.
It's so ridiculous. Yeah, like when you like I was really, I guess, demoralized when I found out that that was what we had to look forward to. Really? Like the manipulator? Like, really? So just me personally, like I went into the fight already not happy. Like I already was like, man, I hate this place. I don't want to be here. But you know, I'm gonna clear it. I want to learn it, which I am slowly starting to like it a little more each time I do it. I like it way more than A2, but I'm really biased on A2. But I think like if I was gonna say the biggest piece of advice that I could give a new group is tethers, 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 tethers. Help each other out on tethers. I have wiped so many times to stupid fucking tether fuck ups. It is unreal. Like people have been killing other people. People didn't save us. Like one time we had all 5 tethers on the target and no one grabbed one. No one even grabbed one on accident. We're like, why did he die? Well, no one helped. And like we had so many wipes to tethers, it irritated us. And I would just say that if you're a new group, peel off of the leg, make sure you get the tethers because, and like if you do the sack strat, which I assume everyone is doing the sack strat, the first 4 legs of the fight are actually the hardest in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with the Carnage Zeros being the annoyance, yeah.
Because like I don't know, but like then again, I don't heal it, so I'm sure from a healing perspective, it is crazy different. I'm just strictly speaking from a tank perspective, so I don't know what it's like to heal that. I don't even want to imagine. But just from my perspective and in my opinion, I think that the 4 legs are the most difficult. Just because of the positioning with the ad, the positioning with the tethers, like right after you feed the ads. I just think that the 4 legs are slightly more difficult than the last phase if you're using a sack strat. And I think the most difficult part about the legs is the tethers. So help each other out, peel off the leg, sacrifice the GCD if you have to. It will give you so many more attempts and your damage will not be affected by that much because every time the tether target dies, the boss gets a stack, which is essentially a wipe anyway. I don't know if a group has cleared it with the boss having a stack. It's probably possible. I don't know. I don't even want to know.
It's not as bad as you might think. The boss having a stack.
Yeah, like in my groups, whenever the boss gets a stack, we just usually wipe. We actually haven't really tried to continue.
I would encourage you to just keep on going. It's really not as bad as it used to be. I think early on it was a guaranteed wipe, but most of the times these days, if for whatever reason somebody screws up and there's a stack, we just keep going.
Yeah, because like when because we could barely live through. Like we would usually have deaths if we had the last mortal revolution.
The mortal rev is scary, and it does require maybe a fairy nom nom and dissipation and Frosty's laughing over there.
He said nom nom. I don't know. That's funny to me.
That's what I call it.
Okay.
Requires a bit more mitigation than the normal. Those are all very true. I think sack strat, Carnage Zero is probably the most annoying part of the fight.
Yes.
Take that for what you will, whether or not you guys find Carnage Zero to be simple or difficult. I think most people at this point, after many, many months of A4, have decided that Carnage Zero is, all things considered, the most annoying part. Whether it's easy or hard, it's irrelevant. I guess some of the other things we could talk about. I do know a lot about Dark Knight in that fight, mostly because I worked with Yoda and his Dark Knight quite a bit during A4 Prague. When you're on a fight for 4 weeks, you tend to talk a lot about the fight.
Yeah.
And for Warrior specifically, Warrior can do some kind of cool things in that fight. One thing that I like to do, and this isn't really a tip that's going to change your fight or anything, but it's just something that you can add to your game. Because of how TP efficient Warrior is, Warrior can actually get away with sprinting in that fight, coming back from quarantines. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but because of pacification timings and stuff, you can time your pacification so that you get pacified right as you're exiting the quarantine. And if you want to get really cheeky, you can click off your berserk right as you land, so you get pacified right as you land. Um, and you can sprint back to the leg because of equilibrium. You can sprint back to the leg and get an extra global or two because of it. And that global might be the difference between reapplying an eye on the leg before you get thrown into another quarantine or not. So just something to consider. And we'll just ignore the fact that a tank can get away with sprinting in the middle of a fight. It's kind of but okay. In terms of other areas where equilibrium is useful, I would assume this is kind of common knowledge, but maybe it's not, so we won't make any assumptions right now. When you're doing the sack strat, it's generally preferred to have your warrior be one of the sackers, primarily because of equilibrium. They can res and not have to worry about their TP after their res. They're right back at 4. You res with 200, and then you equilibrium right back up to 400, and you're good until you die again. And then
Yep.
usually the next death is going to be LB3'd anyway. But so having your warrior off tank is probably preferred for the sack strat. When we're offering savage tips here, I can't imagine people would be interested in hearing about the Nissi strat. If you guys are interested, I have some tips I can give, but I don't know if people want to hear about that.
I can't imagine anyone's ever going to try to do the Nissi strat.
Yeah, in case there's some really ambitious people out there watching the show, and you want to try it before 3.2 comes around, you really want to push your group and see what your group's got, I will just highlight some of the strengths of Warrior in that fight with Nissi. I talked a little bit about it a couple minutes ago, in that the health pool of Defiance is actually a very key asset to dealing with Nissi. It makes Warrior a much desirable holder of Nissi than the Dark Knight off tank. Notice I said Dark Knight off tank. I didn't say Paladin off tank. You're not bringing a Paladin to a Nissi. It's just don't. You can do it. You can do it, and it has been done. However, don't give yourself that headache. It's a headache you don't need. The Nissi is already enough of a headache. Don't bring the Paladin into the mix. So run your Warrior Dark Knight when you're doing your Nissi. But if you don't have an option, yes, Warrior Paladin has cleared the fight with Nissi.
Yeah.
We've done it in alt raids. One of the keys that I was talking about is Defiance HP pool for battling Nissi, and because of that, you do lose out on Dark Knight you do lose out on a tank with access to Dark Mind for tanking the Royal Pinnacle Tank Buster, which Perpetual Wraith. I got it, and that is kind of annoying. So you do have a little bit worse of a Perpetual Wraith tank, but you're trading it off for a much stronger Nissi main tank. So I do favor having the Warrior main tank and the Dark Knight off tank when dealing with Nissi. Other than that, I just question people's sanity and whatnot for even wanting to think about Nissi, I guess would be my next concern with them.
It just makes me wonder why they thought that would be a good idea or even fun.
Well,
I
really like the idea of it because mechanically it's very, very taxing and challenging. However, the implementation of it was not fun at all. The damage values of the actual mechanics were tuned so high that when you interact the fight's mechanics with a 3500 ticking Nissi, it's very, very annoying, for lack of a better word. There's just no other way to describe it. It's not interesting to die to something that is nothing other than my HP pool cannot deal with this. This interaction mechanics, my HP pool cannot survive. So we have to wait until enough gear drops so that our DPS makes it so these mechanics no longer interact with each other. And that was annoying, but that's a tangent.
Yeah. I feel like we need to take like a second and just talk about paladins and try to give them some sort of positivity to them. There's a handful of paladins in the chat that are really, Really depressed.
Just
I actually
really
think
angsty right now.
Yeah.
I actually think that Paladin is better designed than Dark Knight, just
Oh, I would agree with that
because
100%.
yeah, and really the only issue with Paladin is they just don't do any fucking damage in Shield Oath. If they did more damage in Shield Oath, like they would probably be as needed as a Dark Knight or more because
Sure.
they have more cooldowns than a Dark Knight.
Yep. So,
And I think a
yeah, go
lot
ahead.
of people forget about how good Stone Skin is because I consider Stone Skin technically a cooldown. It's kind of a
That,
shitty cooldown,
that's
but
really
it's
interesting that you
still
say that.
something that you can that is guaranteed. It's quote unquote on demand mitigation, and like me and my friend Chet, the co-tank in my first group, he had an amazing idea. This is probably the best idea I've ever heard about how to make paladins better. Um, their lack of damage is simply in shield oath. Their sword oath damage, I think, is fine. It's a lot. I've seen some really skilled paladins do impressive numbers in sword oath, and to fix their shield oath damage, all they would have to do was make fight or flight like Unchained. So not only did it give you the 30% physical damage, but also remove the
Interesting
penalty.
idea.
Now they might have to adjust the duration, maybe make it like 20 seconds instead of 30.
30 seconds of Unchained would be a little
Yeah,
ridiculous.
but I think that one simple change, because that wouldn't increase their damage in Sword Oath at all. I mean, at all. But that's not where they need it. They need it in Shield Oath. So I think that would be like a perfect solution to what he came up with. And the thing they did with Shield Swipe, I loved the fact that they did that with Shield Swipe because whereas before Paladins kind of struggled in keeping aggro in Sword Oath, now they get a free 3 times threat move every 15 seconds whenever they block
Hmm.
that doesn't interrupt their combo. They just do it. And I think that really helps Paladins tank in Sword Oath more um, than it did before. But I really think that if Paladins just didn't, they just need to do more damage. Like Yoshi P needs
Yeah.
to get off his fucking high horse, and he needs to realize that Paladins they do absolutely trash damage in Shield Oath, and they need to fix that. That's unfair. That's unfair to them, and they need to fix it.
Now you leave my Yoshi P alone, man.
So one of the things that you were getting at, I think, when we talk about paladins and sword oath tanking is, the threat issue. I have noticed that when we were doing A3 prog with a paladin because we I you know I will give paladins credit where credit is due. Sheltron is an amazing ability. Um,
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
Sheltron is an incredibly strong ability, and if paladins, were higher on the damage output, uh, they would be preferred in many, many scenarios
yeah.
because of Sheltron. It's extremely powerful in terms of mitigation and cooldown. Um, but one of the things about Paladin is the threat in Sword Oath when you're fighting against these high threat classes such as really good White Mage or really good Astrologian or a Black Mage with foes and Trick Attack. Um, when you're in Sword Oath, you're having to halone more than more than usual, especially in your opener. And these days, haloning essentially is cutting into your Goring Blade and your Royal Authority uptime, which is hurting your DPS. Whereas you have a class like Warrior, which can just be generating threat while doing its highest potency combo and its Butcher's Block combo. So that is one of the key differences between the classes. And now that you have this, if Paladins are able to establish a strong enough threat lead in Sword Oath, they do deal fairly strong damage while maintaining, and that shouldn't be ignored, and definitely was not ignored by us. I jokingly like to shake my head at Paladins, but I'm not oblivious to where their strengths are and where their strengths can be used. I do think that there is some things that they could tweak to make the class a little bit more desirable, and I sort of already talked about them at the beginning of the show. I think Clemency could have a little bit cooler of an interaction than it currently does. But one thing that I did want to highlight that you mentioned earlier is Stone Skin, because I thought it was really interesting that you mentioned that Stone Skin, you treated Stone Skin as a cooldown, because I have a bit of a story, and I don't know if we have time.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is shortly after I joined Collision. I had came from D&T in beforehand when I joined Collision, and when I was in D&T, one of the staples of my team and the general atmosphere of the environment was our foremost concern when doing fights was damage and optimization. And when you're treating a fight like that, when you're thinking about a fight like that, thinking about stone skinning, or later on in the future thinking about clemencying, it's certainly not an optimal choice, and you want to not ever be in that position, because that's cutting into your DPS uptime and your debuff uptime. But when I joined Collision, beforehand had Leroy tanking for them, and Leroy is notorious, in my eyes at least, for being a very, very conservative tank. He's very passive. He's what I call a progression tank. I like to joke about them. It's the tanks who, they're in defiance all the time. They maybe not all the time, but much more than necessary. And they're very conservative with their uptime, and they're dealing with mechanics and things of that nature. But I'll never forget doing turn 9 during turn 9 Savage, because I joined them in 2.3, and I was playing Paladin for the team because the team already had a warrior at the time. And I remember calling out in Mumble, I have nothing for this next golem clap, because I was tanking a buffed golem at the time. And Leroy, being the conservative player he is, just says, just stone skin yourself. And I thought to myself, he's right. I can just stone skin myself. What am I talking about? I have a cooldown. I can just stone skin myself. So
Yeah.
I'll never forget that interaction with Leroy, because it actually kind of shaped. It's really funny. It kind of shaped the player I am today, and it's nobody's going to think about this in my team. I don't even think anybody's going to remember it. Leroy might remember it, but nobody else is going to remember it. But that little back and forth that me and Leroy had in over that span of that 5 seconds actually shaped the player I am today, because it got me thinking outside of the box.
Right.
Like, okay, I don't have any cooldowns, but sure, I have this less optimal. Surely, yes, it's less optimal, but I have this less optimal option in cutting down on damage and stone skinning myself to get through it. So there's a lot of merit to that, and it is getting a little off topic in the sense, but there's also a lot of merit to thinking outside of the box and breaking the mold. And a class like Paladin can do that more so because of things like stone skin, and that's a strength of Paladin that probably should not be ignored.
That was excellent. I hope that actually inspires some of the paladins in chat not to go commit Sudoku or Sudoku, and they can do their puzzles too,
Yeah.
right?
I remember in T13 progression, stone skin was really important on
On the Earthshaker targets
that
too.
had like double orbs.
Mhm.
Like we actually cleared T13 with 2 ninjas, so we didn't have dragon kick when we cleared, and let me tell you about how that was miserable. So stone skin, whenever Chet would stone skin people, it really mattered. And yeah, like I'll never forget that. Because he like those stone skins that he threw out on like DPS or healers with like multiple orbs. Because this was back before when like Dragoons had the buff, like when
Yeah,
they took
before the
insane,
buffs, right?
insane magic
No
damage.
magic
Like
defense.
you couldn't even live through. Flames of Rebirth was the ability you couldn't think of earlier, but the Phoenix did, but yeah, you could, like, if you were a Dragoon, you couldn't even live through it without like APOC at like 12 stacks or some crazy stuff like that, just because their magic defense was so low. So our Dragoon actually switched to Ninja after we killed that because of all the magic damage from T13. Because he just lived longer as a ninja. As weird as that sounds.
No, I mean, that's just the way it was before the Dragoon buffs. I think there were very few, before the buffs, obviously, there were very few teams that actually cleared with the Dragoon. just because it was such a headache dealing with getting them through
Yeah.
Giga Flares, getting them through, all the magic damage in the fight.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be the one person who I'm not going to level another tank or care about other tanks besides Paladin because I feel like it's such an underdog that I could have more fun
Fight
with
the
it.
power, man.
Yeah, fight the power. It's Paladins are fun, and I have one
I
up to
think
16. I think they're fun.
I think I do sort of joke about Paladin a lot, but on a more serious note, I do give Paladin probably more credit than most people. I'm not as doomsday about Paladin as most people might think I am. Um, I see areas where the class shines, and specifically anytime you can abuse Sheltron, it's just like a red flag, a green, a big light bulb should go off over your head, and Paladin should just come to mind.
Hmm.
Also, Divine Veil is a very strong ability. I will confess that we toyed with the idea of bringing a Paladin to A4 Savage, but halfway through Prague, we decided we didn't decide. We were toying with the idea of, yes, we need the damage of the Dark Knight Dragoon Ninja comp. However, this fourth Mortal Rev is really stupid, and we'd really love to have a Divine Veil here. Should we bring a Divine Veil and figure out how to do damage in other areas? And we ended up deciding against it purely because of damage. However, Divine Veil definitely needs to be part of the conversation whenever you're considering a Paladin.
Okay.
It's really good.
All right. So we have a couple options here. We have a few other things that we can talk about. They're just kind of miscellaneous topics. And we can go over them quickly if you want to, or just jump straight into viewer questions. Because we do have a handful of viewer questions here that are definitely worth going over. Do you guys want to talk about any of it?
I got all night.
Sure.
All right. So let's do a quick. This is going. Okay, we went in this all these tips that we had for Savage, and then we went into how Paladin is not Doomsday. As okay, guys, it's great. Now I want to go a little bit into a different topic about tanking overall, and actually comparing tanking. We did that actually a little bit so far in the conversation too, between 2.x and now 3.1. Or would you guys say pretty much the difference is the DPS checks, and that Paladins kind of fell a little bit out of the loop in tanking?
I would, yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
Like,
I would say.
I think that in 2.x, I think that I don't think DPS was mandatory on a tank. I think it always helped, and every little bit was important, but I don't think it was mandatory. Where you go to A3 and A4, it is mandatory. You have to do damage as a tank. You don't have a choice. So I think that is the biggest change from 2.x to 3.0.
Yeah, I would agree. Also, the strength of Halone debuff is not as strong this tier as it was in previous tiers. This tier had a lot of magic damage. Dark Mind saw a lot of use. A lot of Paladin strengths rely on the fight, and the same goes for Dark Knight. A lot of Dark Knight strengths rely on the fight. Because Warrior is so staple right now, the secondary slot of Paladin and Dark Knight will be interchanged based on the encounter design in the future.
No. Okay, so let's go into that. Let's go into the future a little bit. What are we looking at in the future of rating? Seeing how kind of the feedback that we got from a lot of players, what do you think that Square might actually take an action on? I mean, this is of course all hypothetical. We have no clue what they might do, but where do you guys see the future of rating going towards? Is it going to stay kind of in the same direction, or are they going to make some critical changes that you kind of expect to happen when we hit 3.2?
As early as 3.2?
Yeah, let's say as early as 3.2. For right now, 3.2.
I think Xeno wanted to say something. I'll let him go.
I think so. In that last live letter or whatever it was, they mentioned that the number of expected players to clear 3 and 4 were way lower than they anticipated, which is what Diadem's here for. They give you gear in hopes to push groups past 3 and 4. They actually mentioned something that if the numbers don't improve, they're going to nerf 3 and 4. And in the past, we've never had this before. We've never had pre-nerfs before the next raid tier. or whatever. We've never had nerfs before the next raid tier.
Yeah.
So I think. And Yoshi also said that the next raid tier, depending on those numbers, was going to be easier than than Savage is now. Which I don't know why. I have no idea why that they listened to the people that said Final Coil was too easy. Like, there were some people that said Final Coil was too easy. Who cares if it was cleared in a week? Like, the groups that cleared it in a week or a week and a half or 2 weeks, they're amazing groups. They're very talented and skilled players. They deserved that clear. They weren't gated by gear. They didn't go into turn 13 demoralized because they already knew that they couldn't clear it because they didn't have the gear. Like, the Final Coil was, in my opinion, based on skill more than gear. So they lost that when they made Savage. A lot of people quit playing because of Savage. Like, that's what Living Liquid is. He's the salty tears of all the raid groups that he has devoured. So I think that, well, I hope that they do this, but because of what was said in the live letter, I hope the next raid tier is somewhat easier. I enjoy difficult content. I really do. But there comes a point when, like, there comes a line where that you cross between difficult and fun. And at the end of the day, I don't play this game for its difficulty. I play this game because it's fun. I play this game because I enjoy playing it. And, you know, because it's awesome, because it's fun. So I hope that in the next raid tier, they make it slightly less difficult, but keep it challenging, but bring back the final coil, or just the coil aspect in general, just the fun factor of it. Like, all the turns of Final Coil were fun. Well, to me anyway. The same with second. And I hope that they bring that back, because I remember in, like, Final Coil days, there was like a running joke on Sargatanas where I was the 9th man around all the different raid groups because I enjoyed helping other raid groups. Whenever someone was out, like, I could fill in, like I could tank or DPS. And that was amazing. Like, I remember capping my Poetics every week, or, whatever that tombstone.
I think it was Poetics,
yeah. Time. Yeah, Poetics. I remember I never ran like Expert. I never ran the World of Darkness or whatever the fuck it was called. I literally would cap every week by helping out groups. And I missed that from 3.0 because I almost never do Savage now, just because no one is doing it. And so I really hope that in this next raid cycle, they scale the difficulty down just a little bit, add more of a cool / fun / memorable aspect to this. Because I will never forget the first time I killed T13. I will never forget it. I will never forget the first time I killed turn 9. I will never forget when that big-ass, badass Heaven's Key fell from the sky and pushed everybody back, and the music is just like, oh, I'll never forget that. That was amazing. That just
And you're
blew
all
me
dead
away.
because you're in the wall.
Yeah, it just blew me away. Like, I'll never
Literally.
forget that.
But will you forget your A4 kill?
I mean, my A4 kill was, I don't know, it's kind of like, ugh.
Okay.
I'm glad that's over.
What do you guys think that they could do? Is there anything they could do tanking-wise to make the fights more interesting for you?
For us, or for the general, like,
For tanking
player base?
overall. Well, I mean, general player base and for you guys, I guess.
It's an interesting question. Go ahead.
I think they've done a pretty good job keeping it interesting. The tanking meta is
tanks,
really awesome.
Yeah,
I think the
think
tanking meta is really awesome. So, like, as far as, like, I don't know, mechanics, I think they're, like, pretty spot on as far as tanking goes.
Okay.
I would agree. Like I said earlier, the only one that was kind of lame was A1 because of how linear it was for tanks. However, A3 was a really great design fight for tanks.
Yeah.
Just the way that the fight progressed, and I will say that what I've noticed in MMOs, because I've played quite a few up to this day, is that I've noticed a trend in fights that are designed with static phases, um, being more mechanically appealing than fights that aren't. And when you have a fight like A3 Savage that's completely timer based and static through every one of its phases, it's for me it was just a very enjoyable experience going through the fight as a tank. Just kind of a side comment, I guess, but a fight like A4, I want them to avoid.
Yeah.
I want them to not repeat what they did with A4. I want them to look at what they did with A3 and emulate that for tanking.
Yeah, A3 was awesome. It was
It had it all.
really fun.
It had equal responsibility
Yeah.
among all players, and it had equal responsibility between your tanks. I think that's what else could you ask for?
All right.
It was really well designed too, because they they not only stacked a bunch of mechanics on top of each other, but they had completely new mechanics too, like the polarities and like how hard like Cascade hit in early progression. Like I just thought that was really cool, and they had like the different puddles that all had their own set of mechanics. I thought it was a really awesome fight. They did a really good job with it.
All right. Well, so hopefully we'll see more of that. Layla, are you when we hit 3.2 and you've experienced the walking through mud of clearing A through 3S, are you looking for more of, hey, it's possible for us to clear this in a week, learning the fight instead of having to get gear to meet DPS checks in order to clear it?
So I'm a little torn. However, my answer is going to be somewhere in between. I thought A4 progression was ridiculous. I thought the fact that it took 5 weeks of my summer to kill a inanimate object was obnoxious. And it was really just not an enjoyable experience. I'm just going to be honest with you guys.
Right.
I think anybody who follows any of my team's Twitter accounts can tell that we did not have an enjoyable time doing A4 progression. It was not fun for us. It was not interesting for us. It just wasn't an enjoyable use of our time. But you got to finish what you started, and that was the only thing. That was the only thing that kept us going. That and the, just massive support from friends and people online. I think that one thing that I do find enjoyable is like the concept of a sprint. Nobody cared about Alexander normal progression, but we sort of made a game out of it, and we treated it as this really intense race in Alexander normal. We were really competitive with the other teams in our server going into Alexander normal. It was a sprint, and it was a lot of fun because when you something like Alexander normal, the team that wins is going to be the team that gets all the one shots, going through the fights and just not dying at all. And so every time you die, you're at risk for losing. So it's a sprint to the finish line without dying, and that was really fun. So there is a merit to content, and there is an enjoyment in content that's cleared quickly. That's a very extreme example, I know, but let's get back to Final Coil's example. There's a merit of Final Coil's sprint to the finish line, for lack of a better word. It was a sprint. In the first week, you weren't going to get any more gear upgrades. You only had the gear you went into the beginning of the week with, and it was up to nothing other than you and the 7 other players in your party to make that gear into a Bahamut kill, and that was fun. I mean, the end of the story is that we lost, so that it wasn't as fun as it could have been. However, it was still a really enjoyable experience. Now, if I examine the full scope of progression, do I think that removing the aspect of gear is good? I am inclined to say no, but there is a line that shouldn't be crossed. I think when you start getting into like the second and third weeks of gear from raids, one thing that can separate groups is how they ration their resources and their gear. Sure, you're up to the mercy of the RNG gods and what drops. However, there's outside of maybe like getting nothing but fending right side to drop. There's not much. There's not much gear that can drop that completely kills your progression. I will say that this argument is kind of ignoring the fact that you can have a bunch of fending drop and be boned, because that can happen, and that has happened. I have watched it happen to teams. So, to an extent, I think rationing gear and the skill that goes into rationing gear and the experience that goes into it is a pretty important part of rating and progression. And maybe if they can make RNG less of an issue in regarding that, and I don't know how they'd want to go about that. Maybe if that means more loot dropping from a boss or more bosses. Wink, wink. Hello? Anybody listening?
Yeah, I can't wait till we get to that part of this.
But, however they want to do that, I think that completely removing gear from the equation is not a good idea. But a 5-week gear gate is obnoxious.
Yeah. I'm kind of on board with you there too. I feel like you, Layla, if you're going in with a world first group, it would make sense if you guys clear it by at least the second week.
I mean, who's to say?
Yeah. But, I have no experience with it. I'm happy clearing it before there's new content, so.
2 weeks is a nice rating stint, but I would even be okay with going to a third week, I think. But I think 2 weeks is probably a healthy cycle.
Well, the winning group is 2 weeks, all right? Well, I guess, you guys are probably going to be separated by hours when you start to get into it, so.
Yeah.
All right. So, talking about the future, too, we've talked about this on the show before Diadem came out, and how it was going to kind of affect rating and how it's going to turn into everything, and we had all of our predictions. How has Diadem really affected you guys for looking out for the future and how you need to plan gear out?
I'll let Zeno answer.
I've only done Diadem normal twice. I've done Diadem hard mode once. I plan on doing it more, but not only for the I want to be prepared with Materia for the new changes, which I'm really happy about that they're changing that. But I'm gonna do it eventually. I hate it. I think it is insanely boring. It is amazing if I can stay awake for 90 minutes while I'm in there.
It's so boring as a tank too.
It's like, not only is it boring, but you can't not 100% pay attention because there's those mobs.
That's what I've been saying all week.
Yeah, because there's those mobs, right, that they push you back and you can't fall off, and then there's other mobs that put this damage down debuff on you, and you're just like, oh, I just have to focus enough so that's it's really irritating. And it's like, the only reason why I would want to do it is so that I can stock up on those tokens to purchase Materia 5. If I get a drop, that's great. But if I don't, I'm not really, I've been BIS for a long time now. And the gear you get from Diadem, eventually I'll want to try to get it to increase my group's chances, or increase my own personal potential to deal damage or mitigate or whatever, even if it's slight upgrades of secondaries, anything that I can. But when I heard about Diadem and how it was, the first thought in my head was, okay, this is a Band-Aid fix to their fuck up on Savage. They made Savage way too hard. Most mid-core groups can't clear the shit, so they're giving them all this gear, which is fine. It's fine, whatever. But that's not gonna up their numbers as much as they think. I think that 3 and 4 are gonna get nerfed.
Oh yeah.
Before 3.2. I could be wrong. I actually hope I'm wrong, because people should be able to clear
3.15. 3.15. I know they're nerfing it by 3.1.
Yeah, I have a really sneaking suspicion that they're going to nerf it, but I don't think they should. because in a sense, there's kind of no reason to even do Savage now. Outside of the weapon, there's no reason to do Savage. Absolutely no reason when you can just get free 210 gear.
And that'll be eliminated with the.
Oh my lord! What the fuck was that? Oh, that scared. Well, okay, hold on. That jump was brought to you by Rymia. Thank you for the follow. I'm closing this now. I'm very sorry about that.
That's
okay.
fine. That's fine. That's okay.
But yeah, the weapon is going to be eliminated as a thing. Like Thornton weapons are going to be eliminated with relics coming out in 3.15. I'm assuming.
Yeah,
so
it's
I mean,
because they delayed it. I'm almost positive the relic will be 210.
Yeah.
Because they delayed it.
I would agree.
Yeah, like I think it might be like, you know, there was the Animus or whatever, and then it went to the Novus or whatever that step was. I'm thinking maybe
step?
there. What's that?
Are you talking about the 2.2 step?
Yeah, so it's like, you know how
That's what I
before
compared
it was
it to as
like
well.
it was like 100 and then it jumped up to like 110 or something.
Yep.
I think they might do something like that for the relic because they delayed it. Maybe
Era.
yeah, like maybe you'll get it and it's 200, but then you can upgrade it to 210 or something, or maybe it'll just be 210. If I were to guess though, I would say it would be stronger than the Thornton weapon because there's going to be like quests and shit to it, and usually the relic ends up being best in slot anyway. So
yeah, based on what they, the fact that they're so unhappy with Savage and stuff, I can't imagine they would make a relic inferior to Savage content. They want to give people access to gear that gets them through Savage.
Yeah.
And gets so that I don't think they want to have to nerf Savage. I think they're trying to avoid having to nerf Savage because that sets a really bad precedent for them. I'm going to be honest, and it's gonna be set a very bad precedent for conversations in the future when people complain about fights if they do go through with nerfing it. So I would be surprised if it was less than 210 just based off of what their general agenda is here.
Okay. All right, and so. Layla, I don't think we got your thoughts on Diadem.
It's great. I love it. I do it every minute of the day.
Okay.
I'm going to go queue up right now, actually.
I mean, is your group even thinking about using that as...
Some people do, some people don't. That's the short answer of it. I mean, it's... the longer answer is, when it comes to my group specifically, we're sort of... taking a break and enjoying life right now, and
Gotcha.
enjoying other ventures that aren't related to Alexander or Diadem. But the people that are still enjoying logging in every day, we're doing Diadem. Our FC puts together Diadem hard groups, and we take 3 groups in there and try to make fun of it. But that's the extent of our Diadem career. We've got some people have gotten some really nice drops, and then others. Like myself, have gotten nothing.
Yeah.
hey, I got a 210 neck piece fending.
Bending,
like
oh yeah.
47
How much?
bit,
12 parry?
16 parry.
Yep, sounds all
16 parry. Oh, I needed it. I'm not letting them know it's out of it.
That's 3 tokens right there.
Fuck that. That's 3 tokens. That's 3 pieces I ain't got to worry about. That's the best use of a 210 fending piece right there. That's legit. That's 3 times better.
I have been saving on to my good fending rate. I have gotten a few decent fending right side drops. I don't consider them worth mentioning just because they're fending, but I have been saving them just on the off chance that they do make changes to vitality affecting damage formulas in the future. Maybe they get crazy and implement it or as early as 3.2, but
Yeah.
If you guys have some nice fending pieces right side, don't toss them away just yet. But those 12 parry earrings you looted last night, turn them into a Pegasus mount.
All right, let's jump into some questions here. We got some stuff, and we definitely got some stuff. But I'm going to start with this simple, basic question that we actually got on Reddit earlier this week from user Kaworo0. I think I said that right. I feel pretty proud of myself. What advice could you give players wanting to learn to tank? And I think we kind of hit some of those notes, but let's just assume they have no clue about tanking at all and they're trying to get into it. What are just maybe one tip that would completely change the way they think of tanking?
A tip for somebody getting into tanking, you said?
Yep.
always examine your mistakes before your healers.
Okay.
Yep.
I mean, I actually think that's a good general thought as well. Always look, when you die, what could have you done?
Yep.
Uh, Zeno, you got one?
Like I think if they're just wanting to learn how to tank, if they're like fresh meat, I would say do not fate grind. Do your dungeons all through leveling up, because some people joke that the
Yeah.
dungeons
No, I
are
agree.
really easy, and while they are easy for a new tank, holding aggro is a gladiator. That's a
hard.
feat.
That's that's amazing.
If you
Before
can hold
level
aggro
40.
at level 20 as a gladiator, you're gonna be a good tank, and no one dies. You hold aggro, no one dies.
Yeah.
You're
It's a lot of
you're
tab
you're gonna be
savage
good.
blading and monitoring the threat you have on multiple mobs without flash. It's a lot of micromanagement actually for a level 20.
Yeah, like I would say, because the dungeons, if you do them, uh, eventually you'll get to a point where you'll start to be building up some confidence, and you'll just do these massive pulls. And the bigger the pulls, the more that you have to do to survive. And I think that those little interactions will really matter later when it's time.
All right. We got another question here from Reddit from our friend Clobberknock. What role do you think the materia system should take when we're talking about gear progression? Should it be for progression that's pushing before tome gear is available to catch up, like it has been, or a viable component in in-game gearing, which is kind of what they're moving towards because they're going to add materia to rating gear or materia slots, or just not relevant at all and materia should just kind of fade out, or maybe even somewhere in between? What are your thoughts on materia and how it should be implemented in the game?
I'm gonna lean toward. I would prefer it if Materia played a larger, and this is what they're heading into. It sounds like Materia plays a larger part in endgame gear, in raiding gear specifically. It creates some cool gearing options that teams can do during prog. One of the worst feelings you can have is when you're doing progression and you get a really nice piece of gear to drop, but can't use it. You're down 10 accuracy. Being able to meld your gear around that new piece that dropped and meld that accuracy 5 into your chest piece to meet the new accuracy requirement. I think that's cool, and I think that's healthy for the game. I think that's a much more interesting and desirable system than the system that's in place now, which is literally nothing other than buy out the market board of Vit 4s and Strength 4s before a patch and meld the right side and go into a patch with right side. I mean, that's all the Materia system is right now. It's not very interesting at all. Regarding the changes that are going to be made to right side, from what I don't pretend to admit that I have read all of the changes regarding Materia, but I have been briefed a little bit on what they're planning to do to right side. It sounds to me like you're only going to be able to meld one slot of a main stat on the right side accessories. A lot of people are really concerned about this. Oh, how is this going to affect tanking? How is this going to affect tank's ability to do damage, or tank's ability to wear Vit if you want to go the slaying route? I'm not as doomsday about it because of the implementation of Materia 5s. Materia 5 main stats are really strong. I mean, that's 15 of a main stat in one slot. That's 15 Vit, that's 15 strength in one slot. I don't think it's going to be, assuming that these right sides can even wear I think it's anything over I-150 can wear Materia 5, I think.
Yeah,
I'm assuming.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I would assume that there's going to be new right sides implemented sometime around 3.2. So it's going to be, you're going to be able to use Materia 5s, and I don't think it's going to be as big a deal. I think tanks are still going to be using hybrid right sides during progression. You're still going to see Materia 5s being melded in, and it's not going to change much. But to the call of the question, I like the place they're taking Materia to. I like that it's going to be a part of raid gear, and it's going to make gearing and best in slots more interesting.
All right, Cena.
Yeah, I definitely agree. A lot of people were really upset when they were like, "Oh, you can only meld one main stat," and I didn't take that at all as a bad thing. I'm like, that's really awesome because now I don't have to spend millions on melding anymore.
Right.
Like people are like a lot of people seem to
That's a good
think
point,
that that's
actually.
going to lower tank damage
I
when
didn't think of that.
it's not really because like well actually yeah so before I get into that I just want to say I think it's really good for progression. Like your example was perfect with the accuracy, but I also think it's good for min-maxing because when you no longer need the accuracy, you can put in other slots and like throughout your entire build or all the pieces of your gear, you may get like 70, 80 det, 70, 80 crit, you know, who knows? And that would really matter. But as far as like the changes go, I think it's a good thing because then when a piece of fending drops, you're not automatically like, man, this is garbage because you can meld a strength onto it. So you can
Yeah,
use it.
yeah, I
And
really good point.
yeah, so like ideally, when I first heard about that, I was like, it's just going to be souped up, crafted, because worst case scenario, you have to wear 1 to 2 pieces of fending. Well, on those fending, you're going to have strength melded onto
30
it.
strength right there.
Yeah, and because the fives are so powerful, and then the other 3 pieces or 2 pieces or whatever is going to be strength. So you're going to have a mix probably, like it won't be crafted anymore. It'll be a mix, but it'll be a good mix. It'll be a mix that will matter because you'll still have all your main stat, well, both your main stats, strength and vit, on every single piece. The vit, I think, will be either slightly lower or the strength will be slightly lower. But the
Yeah,
fact that it's only one slot and you actually, the most important part is you actually can use the fending gear. That is the most important part, I think, is that like when a piece of fending gear drops, you're like, fuck yeah, that's mine. I'm taking that. Give me that shit.
yeah,
You know, then you meld strength onto it. So I think that that is amazing.
it's a good point.
I don't think
Solves
it's a bad thing at all.
solves my complaint earlier about how when you're doing progression and racing other teams, when your team gets a fending drop and the other team doesn't, you were at a disadvantage, and maybe now that wouldn't necessarily be the case. As strong of a case, at least.
Yeah. All right. So we have a question from chat from way before. Razor Sharp, or Raxor Sharp actually has an X in there.
That's Miyuki, I think.
Oh yeah.
I think it's Miyuki. I think it is. I could be wrong, but I recognize that name.
I gotcha. Do you think Dark Knight's damage is anywhere even comparable to Warrior's damage?
I think so, definitely.
Yeah, I mean it's comparable. You have to take more risks to get it, though.
Yeah. I think it actually, because grit costs you a GCD, I think you actually have to plan out your dropping grit and reapplying grit more. Like it's more important that you plan that out as opposed to just switching from Defiance to Deliverance because whereas switching from Defiance to Deliverance does not eat a GCD, that lost GCD could be thousands of points of damage, or you know 8,000 point of damage. So that actually could be a DPS loss because like if you're out of grit for like only 3 GCDs, then you reactivate grit. That extra GCD probably doesn't add up, if that makes any sense.
For 3 globals, it probably wouldn't, yeah.
Yeah. So like I think
I haven't mathed Dark Knight, but
yeah. It's I math Paladin like way back in the day, like in 2.x.
yeah,
And I think
Shield
it
Up
was
was like
like
4 globals or something.
yeah, it was something like that. But grit essentially works the same way when you apply it anyway. And I think that it's more unforgiving in that aspect. So I think you have to actually plan out your cooldowns and dropping and reapplying of grit more than you do. But I definitely think it's possible for a Dark Knight to do insane amounts of damage.
Yeah.
Chet, the co-tank in my first group, his damage is crazy high, and he plays Dark Knight.
On the topic of Dark Knight, it's kind of an interesting class. This is the one. I don't like to preach this mentality of you know if you're in your tank stance, you're doing it wrong necessarily. However, Dark Knight more than the other two jobs, I can actually leave you guys with this, opinion, and not feel too terrible about myself. When the amount of, how should I put it? Every second you spend in grit is a detriment to your team. Because grit is very, very, very bad. And there's just so many reasons why, but one of the ways that I think grit is, and this, most people who play Dark Knight, at a high level can probably attest to this. Grit is essentially a 1300 MP inner beast that does no damage.
Yeah.
That's what grit is. I mean, your goal is to minimize grit uptime and apply it in areas where it's needed. And that's why I have a personal problem with the way that Dark Knight is designed. I think it's kind of bad for the class and players who are approaching the class as who are new to the class. It encourages a style of play that's not going to net them success, because the style of play that Dark Knight, that the current meta of the game has evolved into, is your Dark Knight should be out of grit as much as possible. That became a massive requirement during A4 Savage progression. Any amount of time your Dark Knight was in grit on a leg, you were hurting your chances of getting through the fight at the time you needed to get through it. And I think back to leg 3 specifically, when doing, during prog, when people didn't have a lot of gear, trying to one cycle leg 3 with a Dark Knight and grit, that's a tall task. I mean, you really needed to be gritless that entire leg, and mapping out your cooldown rotation to reflect that. So it's kind of unfortunate that the class has kind of evolved into that playstyle where grit is just nothing more than a 1300 MPIB.
Right.
But I don't really know what they should do to change that. One thing that they could do, but I think it would maybe be a little too strong, they might have to tweak some other stuff, is I'm not sure why Blood Weapon isn't usable in grit. It's kind of one of the major reasons that grit is as weak as it is the class has no steroid in its defensive stance. The other two classes at least have something that they can augment their damage with in their defensive stances, whereas Dark Knight doesn't. So Dark Knight is encouraged to drop grit and make use of the offensive cooldowns that doesn't have access to in grit whenever they come up. And is that by design by Square, and this is not an oversight? Then I think it's an interesting design choice. That's just what I'll end my rant about Dark Knights on.
Okay, that's good.
I think Square's idea was that the Dark Knight high potencies and so many off GCDs was supposed to make up for their lack of offensive cooldown. Because Dark Knight has some of the highest potency abilities and combos.
Scourge is really strong.
Yeah, they also have the most off GCDs as well. I think that was what they were thinking, was, okay, well, we can't give them...
Just the numbers didn't work out that way, was the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, I just think that it was... it's just a really badly designed class. Like, it's just really... it's not designed very well.
You alluded to it earlier. I mean, I think the interaction between the Dark Arts, Dark Passenger, and the fact that the class wants to actually be hit and parry when everything is blinded is kind of funny.
Yeah, like I don't know if you've ever done this, but there has been countless times when I have accidentally Dark Arts to Dark Dance. And when you do that, it is absolutely miserable. You waste so much mana on nothing. Like the fact that ability is Dark Artsable it just perplexes me.
So many bosses can't even miss.
Yeah, it's unreal.
Yeah. All right. So we have another question here from Nightmare, saying earlier you both talked about HP and playing conservative while first learning fights for progression. How do you both gauge proper health pools, not counting crafted accessories?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was following along and then I lost it midway through.
Yeah. So earlier, you guys talked about HP and playing conservative, while first learning fights for progression. How do you both gauge proper health pools? And they added in not counting crafted accessories. And I mean, like, when you gauge health pools, you guys always think about crafted accessories, right? 'Cause,
Yeah.
I mean, that's like the
Crafted accessories are a must-have for progression. There is no, you don't go in with 2 fending and 3 string. You go
No,
in full
you avoid
crafted.
fending.
Yeah. You never wear full, like if you're wearing fending, you're doing it wrong. Just simply for the fact because that piece of fending could be a crafted. It's just that simple, really. So um, going in with fending gear, like I would never do that. Never. I mean, in 3.2 I might, but that fending gear is going to have strength melds on it, so not really, kind of. Um, but as far as like finding HP thresholds, there really isn't a set number. There's not like a set number for an HP threshold. At least like that I can think of. I have my own personal HP thresholds, and I get asked a lot like how much HP should I have in in this encounter or this encounter, and I typically have an answer. Just for example, I usually say in A1 you should have around 17.5 out of Defiance. Can you get away with less? Absolutely. I think I have like 16.9 something. Whatever full slaying is, 210, that's how much HP I have, and I'm fine on it.
16.8, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and like I'm perfectly fine on it, but would I recommend that to other people? No, because I it's my own personal comfort level. Like some fights I wear one crafted. Do I absolutely need that one crafted? No, probably not, but I kind of weigh the strength of the extra strength versus 600-700 extra vit. More times than not, that 600-700 vit is going to be more important to me than the extra 15-16 strength. So whenever I personally calculate HP thresholds, I look at the hardest hit I got in the fight, the very hardest attack that I was hit with, and I kind of like I take that number and I add like, okay, well, what cooldowns did I have? Did I have Inner Beast? Did I have Vengeance? You know, did I have just Vengeance? Did I have Thrill? Did I just raw dog that shit? And I kind of take that number and I usually add 2.5, 3,000 to it. There's really not like a set thing that I do either. I just kind of like, because you have to include the auto attack after, even though sometimes you get the auto attack before. But that's just kind of how I do it. And like I said, like each HP threshold is going to be different from person to person because one person may not be as comfortable as on A1 as I am. Or like we'll take A4 for example. I usually wear 2, 3, 4 piece of crafted. I hate that turn. I want to get in there. I want to do it, and I do not care about my damage. That I can safely say in A4 I don't give a fuck about my highest parse, my FF log parse. Yeah, nah, not me. I want to get in there, I want to clear it, and I want to get the fuck out because I hate that turn. But that's just me personally. So like other people, they wear like full slaying in A4. But me, like I usually wear, I mean like I have worn all slaying, but usually like if we had some unfortunate wipes or something, I just say fuck it, I'm just going to put on a couple extra pieces of crafted just to be extra safe because I'm tired of being in here. So like I said, it kind of depends on person to person, but that's kind of how I figure out my own personal HP thresholds.
all right. We have another question here from Casey Diaz. Does skill speed matter at all for warriors? If so,
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
then they
It's-
asked, what's the ideal number for it?
We're chasing the 10 global dream.
Whew, that's a dream.
High number.
Yeah.
Um,
Jeez.
what is the actual number for 9 global in Heaven's Word? It's,
It is 450-ish,
450.
depending on ping.
Okay.
Like
I'm at 600, so I just didn't even care.
yeah. Like on good days, I can hit 9 hits at 433 is the lowest It's like 433 or 431. I know it's not under 430, but that is like the lowest that I have ever hit every single Berserk GCD on, and I wouldn't recommend that number. Like, I would actually recommend like 600, 625. I think BIS without diadem gear is around 625.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and that's what I would recommend because when you go to like Thornton and like turn 3, you'll notice that, like, we'll take the Sacred Cross for example. With like 600 skill speed, you can actually build 5 abandon stacks and fell cleave.
Yep.
Whereas if your skill speed is like 500 or like under 500, it is super, super sketchy, and 9 times out of 10 you're not going to get it.
So somebody who's done a lot of Thornton.
Yeah, dude, I love that fight, man.
Somebody's done a lot of Thornton.
Oh man,
I mean, that's great. The new thing, right? I mean, everyone wants to do Thornton because it's actually interesting to do, and you can stream it too, and it's fun. So
yeah, I mean, I love that fight. But also in A3 too, when the living liquid like disappears and goes to the hand, it's really irritating when you use Storm's Eye and he like, yeah, well he like you'll use Storm's Eye, right? But because the animation is like 9 years, you won't actually apply the debuff.
You get the stack, but you don't get the damage or the debuff.
Yeah. So it's really irritating. So having that extra skill speed like really matters. I would say that skill speed is above crit to a certain extent because
to a threshold.
Yeah, so it's like you have like a skill speed. So like skill speed is kind of like accuracy in a sense where you want a certain amount, but then after that you don't really care. So that's kind of how I look at it. But
yeah, I would agree.
All right, we got a question for Xeno here. YOLO lives once. Xeno, how often do you use Dark Passenger, and would you use it with Dark Arts when you, or do you use it with Dark Arts when you do?
I use Dark Passenger whenever it's up. I actually prioritize Dark Passenger over Dark Arts. Well, I prioritize Dark Passenger over a Dark Arts Soul Eater. Because I think it's higher damage, like not like per potency, but as far as your mana management goes. I could be wrong about that though. I'm not the best Dark Knight, but that my damage is pretty high on Dark Knight. But that's what I typically do. I will Dark Arts a Dark Passenger if there's 2 or more mobs up. I think it's not worth it on one, but potency wise, it becomes worth it once there's two or more mobs. Again, I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. But
I'm pretty sure 2 mobs is right also. But I haven't mathed Dark Knight myself either.
Okay. Gamepad Guka, I think. Both Xeno and Layla had similar guides for turn 13. Was this a collaborative effort? How do you even, or how often do you discuss warrior strategies? I think that you guys are kind of back here discussing it.
Contrary to what the chat may believe, we actually just met 3 hours ago.
Yeah.
But that's funny.
We've been warrior bros for a long time, though. We just kind of knew, like, mentally, whoa, this is what we do here.
Yeah, you guys were dreaming things to each other, right? That is pretty funny because, yeah, the first time these guys talked is when I got them on the Skype call. So, all right. So another question from Kenny, almost dying. Do you think that Thornton X is training people for A3S? Like, is it making people who are having problems maybe with A3S better mechanically because they're having to learn Thornton X? Or?
I think maybe in the sense that it stacks a bunch of mechanics on top of each other. Because like in the last phase of A3, that's pretty much what happens, and in the last phase of Thornton, it's pretty much what happens. I think that Thornton is like the perfect in between A1 and 2 and A3. I think that difficulty should have been in the game a lot sooner than before. I don't know if it will, like I don't know if being able to clear Thornton will help you clear that turn like significantly more simple, but I think that in a sense where it stacks a bunch of mechanics on, on top of each other, I think that is a similarity in the 2 encounters. But
yeah, the only issue is again one of the major struggles for every group that tries A3 is dealing with the DPS check, and unfortunately Thornton doesn't really have a very strict DPS check. I guess I haven't done it in low gear, but in the gear that we had going into Thornton, the DPS check is pretty trivial. Maybe I'm sort of not gauging it properly just because of the gear that we went into it with. But the players need to be able to practice a fight that or practice a scenario or in an environment that's really pushes them to want to do more, maximize their damage in order to get through a fight like A3, because that is the key to getting through it. It's finding areas throughout the fight where you can squeeze out more damage while not impacting your responsibilities of the fight.
All right. We have another question here from XX Cute Cupcake XX. What's your best advice to a player who wants to become a hardcore, quote-unquote hardcore player, I guess is the best way to say that?
It's a very loaded question.
It's pretty loaded.
Enjoy the game. It's a big one.
Okay.
I mean, that may sound like such a cop-out answer, but I couldn't be more serious when I say that. I have dealt with personally and spoken to and watched many a group try to get into the world of hardcore progression or taking the game more seriously, and they get into it for all the wrong reasons. I attribute any bit of, if you can call it success, that I've had playing this game, or my team has had playing this game, or my FC, to nothing more than the fact of we were a group of players who just really enjoyed the game and playing the game with each other. And I can't stress that enough. The prize at the end of the stick is great, but if you don't enjoy the game, you're not going to want to log in and better yourself every day you're playing it, which is essentially what you need to be doing if you want to get into taking the game more seriously.
All right. That's a really good answer. Zeno, do you have anything else besides that?
Depending on the definition of hardcore or like rating or whatever it is, there's going to come a point in time when someone is not going to be pulling their weight. You're going to have to be that person that lets the group know, or let that person know, albeit you pull them aside, whatever. I mean, unless you magically find 7 other people that are all amazing, which I mean is definitely possible, but there's going to be, like, for the general population, there's going to be someone that's not going to be pulling their weight. And unfortunately, you might get called an elitist, you might get called an asshole, but hey, you know what? I mean, it is what it is kind of thing, And like the way I look at it is whenever I am messing up or whenever I need to improve, I know that my best friends will tell me, and that's how you get better. Like, that's how you learn, is like by your mistakes. If you don't make mistakes, then you don't get better, you don't improve. So like there's going to come a time, and like I said, this will depend on how hardcore you're actually going to be. If you're going for like server first, like world top 10, world first, whatever it is, depending on the severity of it, there's going to come a time when you're going to need to, like, one, either take criticism and improve on it, or give criticism, and if the person doesn't improve, you're going to have to replace that person. And that's kind of like, I guess, touchy subject sometime between groups or players, but it's a real thing. Like some players in groups, they think that they're better than their group when that's not the case. You as an individual are not significant. Like, your group is significant. And I think people forget that whenever you're wiping over and over and the same person messes up time and time again, it's because you're not helping that person. You're thinking to yourself, oh, he's going to fuck this up again. Well, maybe he wouldn't mess it up if you explained to him, or maybe you could help that person. So like, I don't know. I think that sometimes people, they think that they're better than the group that they're in, when in reality you're only as good as your group. It's not the other way. And I think that sometimes in hardcore rating that people don't fully understand that. And someone has to be the asshole that says that.
Yep. I
So I
mean,
don't know. I would say prepare for that.
I run a pretty laid back casual group that goes pretty slow through progression. I've had to make the call to kick people out of the group, and it sucked. It's a horrible, horrible feeling to have to do that, especially when the guy's like not a bad guy, but you have a choice here. You can run with this guy who's not that great, or hold 7 people back and hit a wall for the rest of your time raiding. If that person refuses to improve. I spent maybe 3 weeks giving suggestions and getting no responses at all. And sometimes you kind of have to just do that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
the
think
player's not receptive.
I mean, that's what it was. I mean, it's just, they're not receptive. You're like, hey, this is how you're going to have to change in order to fix it. I've looked up, I have no clue
Yeah.
what we're doing here, but these are the resources. This is how other people are getting better. This is another person who's really good at his job. Talk to him a little bit, and still nothing changes. You kind of have to make the cut every once in a while.
Yeah, I think that it also depends on if you're rating with if you have the mentality of I don't care about any type of firsts, I just want to have fun. I'm having fun with my friends, either real life or online, whatever, then that option will never come up because you guys aren't rating with that mentality. But as far as a hardcore mentality, like if you're gonna like that's the definition of being hardcore is you have to set expectations for your group. If you don't meet those expectations, something is wrong and you need to fix it. I think that's ultimately the goal of a hardcore raid group is to come together and fix the issues or the problems that they're having with the particular encounter, whatever it is. And I think that really separates extremely skilled groups from groups with skilled players, but they're not good as a group, is that they don't solve their issues like that.
All right. I'm going to do one more serious question, then I'm going to run through some troll questions here. Sorry for everybody who's been like asking lots of questions in here. A lot of the questions, actually, almost half of the questions that were asked have been answered in this podcast. I just feel like it'd be kind of redundant to kind of ask them again. They might have been asked actually before we went over the topic. This last question here is Zinzai. What are your opinions on healers who say aggressive healing or aggressive tanking limits their ability to DPS?
Well, this is Xeno's expertise here, so I'll give him the mic.
Fucking Zinsai. I was gonna do my Australian accent, but I'll save it. I don't want to embarrass myself. Anyway, so I would argue the fact that some people say, like, and some people really believe this, that if a tank wears full fending, a healer will do like 100 DPS per piece of fending. I don't know where that came from, but I've heard that like multiple times. So apparently if you wear full fending, each healer should do no less than 800 DPS every time, all the time, no matter what. But my argument with that is that this game, the tanking meta in this game, that doesn't matter. And the reason why it doesn't matter is because this meta is about mechanic damage with predictable bursts. So it doesn't matter if you have 22,000 life or 25,000 life. When you get hit with a tank buster, it's going to do like, what, 80% of your health, 70%? So regardless if you're full vit or not, you're going to need healing. You will need healing every time during specific points in an encounter. So for those points, that is where you mitigate damage. That is where vitality doesn't matter. It's where you use your cooldowns. Like, you don't tank in this game with vitality near as much as you tank with cooldowns, at least in my experience. So when people say that it is harder to heal a crafted tank, for example, I don't believe that. That is completely inaccurate, because the only thing that you're getting hit with besides tank busters is auto attacks and maybe a cleave. And that's maybe a cleave. And in those cases, if you're in your DPS stance, you're going to have stuff to compensate for your tanking stance. Or, well, the good tanks will. Skilled tanks will compensate. Or they will stay in their tanking stance if they don't have anything to compensate. It becomes an issue when you just raw dog shit. That's where it kind of crosses the line, I think. But as far as like throwing extra heals, you're going to be healed at specific points throughout each encounter, regardless of your HP, because those are like, that's what the meta is based around. It's based around predictable bursts. So like, yeah, I never understood that, why people think that they just need to spam heal you, because that's completely inaccurate.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no damage smoothing in this game. It's not like WoW where auto attacks are racking up damage over time very quickly, and they need to be spam healed. It's all very spiky, large amounts of damage that are separated by large amounts of time.
All right. So let's hit these troll questions real quick, and it's some silly ones here. All right. The Sax Man, is Xeno that guy that says tanks can do damage? Yeah, I think he does that sometimes.
Yeah, that's my friend Banos, aka the Diddler.
Oh, okay, that's a good nickname.
Yeah, take the Diddler however you want.
Then God, I can't say it. Marina. It's Miunih.
Miunih. That's Miu.
Miu.
Yeah.
Miu.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's Miu. It's my white mage.
Oh, it is. Oh my God, I don't know. I just can't say it. All right. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
I had to like spell it out in my head. M-I-U.
Yeah, no, I was
Oh.
spelling it out too.
Yeah.
I was
Look
like,
at it. It's
what?
weird. Okay. Question to Layla: do you eat cereal with or without milk?
Without.
You know what's worse than that is eating it with water.
Oh,
That's gross.
That's the worst.
You're just a
not,
savage.
that's an option?
I've
Not
heard of it, but I've never. I don't think it would be. Okay. Anyways, of course this is. I'm going to leave that for the last one. All right. Forge XIV. I'd like to ask Layla how honey yellow dye helped during Alexander progression.
Immensely. I mean, a lot of people know at this point that we like to carry around stacks of honey yellow dye in our inventories at all times, specifically Miuni, and he divvies it out among us. Whenever we get a gear upgrade in 210 he's right there at the Alexander portal with the trade window open with the honey yellow dye being traded to us. All kidding aside, one of the most memorable times I have about when we cleared A4 is, we all took our gear and went and stood in Idleshire and, hung out with people, and we all dyed honey yellow just to like celebrate. And that was a very special set of screenshots I got. So honey yellow's got a special place in my heart.
Nice. Okay, Zebra Cakes 2. I have a question. I don't. Why did they make the tornado targetable in A3?
I don't know. I mean, you can AoE off it.
Yeah, that's true. So that actually kind of went to a serious
Hit a
question.
heavy
That's
swing
what I
on it,
thought.
so you can hit a maim on the next target.
I don't think I've ever done A3 without seeing the warrior run up there and hit the tornado at least once.
I've done that.
Just to do it. All right. And of course, this was going to be asked. I don't know if there's any way around it. Evolved Male, do you need to be a ginger to be a good warrior?
I mean, the numbers don't lie.
The numbers don't lie. You're right. Oh, God. Of course. All right. So I don't actually have... There's some more questions in here, but I'm going to kind of skip over them because, I feel like we've kind of answered those questions in there. I'm sorry if we didn't get to them earlier, guys. And I want to go kind of into the last bits of the show. I know it's really sad that we're ending the show. This has been a long show.
This has been a really long show.
This has been 3 hours
man.
and 15 minutes so far. So this has been... I'm going to have to make lots of little waypoints. Or did I say waypoints?
You've got your work cut out for you.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
I'm going to have to make it like a content... what do you call it? I'm already just blanking because I'm so out of it right now.
Annotation.
Table of contents, yeah. Table of
yeah.
contents, yeah. Over in the
God,
side
how
and
did I
just
know
leave it on
about
the
that? I
side.
don't even read books. Oh my God.
You read... You told me you actually tried to write a story before, and you're telling me...
I kind of started to, and it turned out okay, but I didn't finish it
Oh,
because I started playing this fucking game.
yeah, all right. All right, so we got to end the show. This has been a really fantastic show. Thank you both, Layla and Zeno, for being here tonight.
It was a lot of
Everyone
fun.
in
Thanks
chat,
for having
yeah.
me in. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
this has been great. I love having you guys on here. I'm probably going to try to get you on here if I can convince you and twist your arm again. Everyone in the chat, please give a round of applause, however you can do that in chat text form for our guests here tonight, because they're really great. Zeno, are there any shout-outs or anything else you want to do or say before we get off the air?
Shout out to my raid group. Shout out to Snuggle Thug. Snuggle Thug. All right.
Does she raid with you?
No, we used to raid, but then I moved my alt. You know what? Let's not talk about that. Oh my.
Okay, what's that talk about?
Awkward.
This is kind of an awkward situation. I'm sorry I brought it up.
Let's not talk about that.
All right, what other shout-outs you wanna do?
Layla, it was awesome to finally meet you, man.
Oh,
Definitely.
likewise, man.
Awesome.
It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right, Layla. How about you? Is there anything else you want to say before we get off the air? Anything? Anyone you want to shout out to?
Felix, do you want to play Overwatch? Oh wait, he can't because he doesn't have it.
Oh. Did you have an actual alpha where it wasn't just the weekend beta or whatever?
I have access to one.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. It's fun. I played it over the weekend. It was actually kind of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun this weekend. I just got it on my account this weekend, and we've definitely played a lot. But shoutouts, obviously shout out to my FC Elysium. Thank you for supporting my team and our endeavors in this last progression tier. We 100% couldn't have done it without the support of our FC mates, and honestly, the support of Gilgamesh as a whole. It was very, very helpful. So thank you again. You shout out to my FC's Twitter. You can follow them on Twitter at ElysiumFFXIV. I have a personal gaming Twitter if people want to know where they can find me. It's at Layla FFXIV. A lot of times I post really dumb Street Fighter related tweets. So if you're into that, by all means. And when I do stream, which is pretty rarely, you can usually find out information about it there.
Yeah, I got a shout out here for your stream channel here, and we're probably going to host Zeno. You're going to stream after this, right?
I think so, but I'm gonna take like a 5 or 10 minute break.
Okay, so we'll run the host over
But I'm
your way.
pretty sure I'm gonna stream.
Zeno
after.
streams like 12 hours at a time. It's just like, I don't know how you do it, man.
I mean, I don't have anything else to do.
That's crazy.
I'm gonna go to sleep.
Yeah, I'm gonna go eat food. But of course, also before leaving, thank you to everyone. Oh, there you go. It's going. It's already going. Of course, before leaving, thank you everyone who watched the show. It's okay. Kerr, thank you for helping collect questions during the show. Tari for the intro cover. Gilly for the artwork. The people who support on Patreon. Of course, the mods in the chat who are keeping it relatively clean in the chat. As clean as the Twitch chat can get. Our next show, actually, I haven't mentioned this at all during the show, and I feel pretty bad about this. This is our last Monday show. We're not doing Mondays anymore.
A send-off.
Yeah, so this is send off to Mondays by Monday. We are going...
Shit, anyway.
Yeah, we're going to do Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And I feel like it's going to be just better overall because we're going to have people from Europe who could probably watch, late night Europe crowd. We can also get people from EU over as well. And also Saturdays in the middle of the day, I'm not going out with my friends in the middle of the day to do stuff, so it doesn't really limit me as much. Like I'm kind of locked in on Mondays. I feel like I can stream other stuff if I move this over to Saturday afternoon. But our next show is Saturday, again 5 p.m. Eastern on November 28th, and we will be doing the Bard Machinist show number 2 to actually complete the last one because we didn't really get enough time in there. We'll bring Creedor on the show, and actually one of your FC mates, Layla, we're going to bring Odala,
okay.
Yeah, back on the show again. We've been doing Monday for 10 months now. I feel like it's definitely time to move it on somewhere that's a little bit more convenient. Okay, so you're streaming. I think I'm going to give you a host here. let's all do a nice 15 seconds of awkward waving here.
Oh, it's my favorite part.
Yeah, for the end of the
Love
stream.
the awkward waving.
Yeah.
Oh, there's
Yeah,
Snuggle
I'm gonna
Thug.
stare,
waving
stare
in the
right
back.
into the webcam.
Stare into it. Just make sure you guys understand
You
how
gotta
much
smile
I
at
care
it too,
about
and
you.
not blink.
You don't need a smile. You just need to have a serious face.